All right, looks like we are live, and I want to welcome everybody to Standing for Truth. My name is Donny, and I am your host for today's program. On Standing for Truth, we defend the truth of biblical creation. We also host some awesome guests here on the program. Today, it is a privilege to have Peter Line here with me once again for this valuable program. Dr. Peter Line and I are going to continue our comprehensive examination of the hominin fossil record. We will be discussing icons of human evolution such as the Australopithecines, Neanderthals, Erectus, Homo naledi, and more. Peter, thank you so much for, again, being so generous with your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, yeah.
It's great to have you again, Peter. What I'll do before we get into your slides and presentation is I'd like to give you a formal introduction. And for anybody unfamiliar with you, they can see the description box of this video where they can find links to your articles and our previous show that we did on this program that was comprehensive. We went for over 3 hours and touched on a number of topics. And so, okay, here we go. Peter's undergraduate majors were in biophysics and instrumental science. After this, he completed master's and PhD degrees in the area of neuroscience, focusing on brain electrophysiology, and spent over a decade involved in such research. Subsequently, he worked as a university lecturer, teaching in the area of anatomy and physiology for over a decade. Peter has been interested in the creation-evolution issue ever since becoming a Christian, as evolution was a stumbling block to him believing God's word was true. He has had a particular interest in the so-called hominid fossils for many years and has published several articles on the topic. Now, since this is part 2 of our ongoing series, examining the evidence for human evolution, I do want to again remind people in the audience, please check out part 1, which can be found in the description box of this video. Now, what I want to do is hand it over to Peter. Firstly, how are you doing today? I've been looking forward to this one for a while, Peter. And I guess we'll just kind of get right into your presentation, my brother.
All right, thanks, Donny. Yeah, no, I'm doing quite well, thank you. So today I'm going to look at firstly the hobbit, officially known as Homo floresiensis, and then Homo naledi, and I don't know what else. There'll be time for much more else. But before starting that, just have a brief look at creationism, because that's kind of my working hypothesis about what may explain some of the strange features we see in some of these specimens in both places. And so I thought just to spend a very brief time just explaining what creationism is, and then go to discuss a bit about the hobbit, which helps then understand maybe what I'm talking about when we get to Homo naledi. And so with creationism, basically, it's sort of related to goiter. So in the sense that where there's a prevalence of goiter in a population, you may find a small percentage of creationism depending on the severity of the situation. So goiter, as you can see on the slide, it's a swelling of the neck from an enlarged thyroid gland, and it's usually caused by iodine deficiency. And usually a correlation exists between the prevalence of endemic goiter and creationism. And basically, iron deficiency is fundamental in the etiology of endemic creationism in whatever area it's found, and is believed to cause damage to the thyroid during fetal life. Just that. I'll have to move on, get my mouse to get to the next slide. Okay, so here indicates this is a survey from the World Health Organization, 1960. So goiter and cretism is probably less of a problem now in most regions of the world, because we have an idea what causes it, and so you put iodine in supplements or whatever in the food, and that helps kind of eliminate it. But they have done surveys in the past, and this shows some of the regions that goiter has been found in, and this shows Africa. And you notice the blue arrow there, that there's a sort of a belt there stretching for about 300 miles, a narrow belt in sort of that part of South Africa. And that belt is in the vicinity of the Cradle Humankind area of South Africa. And that's where the Rising Star cave site is located. Now, and we're not going to talk about that today, but you can see there's in Asia and Europe, basically, you can see here, or part of Europe at least, you can see the blue line that indicates in the Caucasus region where goiter has been found, and so it's quite prevalent there. And that's where the Dmanisi Homo erectus specimens were found, in Dmanisi, Georgia. Now, endemic cretinism, it's the most severe manifestation of iron deficiency in a diet, and there's generally two subtypes. There's neurological and hypothyroid cretinism. So in neurological endemic cretinism, they tend to be more normal stature, but may have severe neurological defects. Usually they're born with a functioning thyroid gland. So damage occurs in the first couple of or first 7 months of fetal life. Now, individual hypothyroid myxodematous endemic cretinism, I think I'll just stick to calling it hypothyroid cretinism, it's easier to pronounce. They may be accompanied by a host of clinical features, including dwarfism. The neurological deficits may be less. Now, endemic cretinism, as I already showed in diagram, it can occur. It has occurred throughout the world, but its morphological traits, the anatomy, can vary substantially. And major characters such as dwarfism and certain neurological disorders may be prominent in some areas, but not in others. So here's a bit about, I may actually skip some of this, but it's sort of it just shows that some of the research on that cretinism is a result of thyroidal damage during fetal life or in early infancy. It's a bit of redundant information here, so I'm going to try to skip some of this to move things along. So hypothyroid cretinism has major development effects, causing bony deformities, mental retardation, and more, and basically caused by iodine deficiency in the unborn. It's common in areas with low environmental iodine, where there is low environmental iodine, and also where there's high incidence of adult goiter. Now, here's some definition by Peter Brown, who actually he doesn't believe Homo florensis is not a modern human with cretinism. He's written a paper on it. Actually, I don't either. I don't believe it's a modern human. I believe it's a robust, what I call robust human, which is sort of an erectus-like human with cretinism. But he has other ideas, about Homo floresiensis. Of course, he was the first author of the first Nature paper on Homo floresiensis. So he's studying a neurological cretins are the offspring of severely iodine deficient mothers who could not provide sufficient thyroxine. That's the thyroid hormone, one of the thyroid hormones, main ones, who could not provide sufficient thyroxine to the fetus during the first 7 months of pregnancy. Now, and this used to be very common before medical intervention. Now, the hypothyroid cretins suffer from fetal rather than maternal thyroid deficiency in the last trimester of gestation, and so I guess that's when it starts to the thyroid, its own thyroid gland has been developed by then, and is starting to produce its own thyroid hormones, but it's not getting the iodine necessary to actually produce the thyroid hormone. So and so basically that can result in thyroid atrophy. And so when the newborn is born, it has a dysfunctional thyroid, and so it can't produce the hormones, and so basically even if you give it iodine, then that may not help that much. You need to supplement it with give it say thyroxine or thyroid hormone to make so that the baby or the newborn will develop relatively normally. So there's a lot of this distinction between the two forms of cretinism. It's sort of unclear whether the two forms of disease can be separated by the development of particular sets of skeletal and dental traits. But the crucial factor is that the thyroid deficiency is present during growth, and he goes on. So stature is often reported as dwarf, but the range extends from 82 centimeters to 1.61 centimeters. So there's a lot of range there. I don't know, you've probably seen pictures of people with cretinism. They can be very, very short, but not all of them are. Only some. So now we're kind of starting to zoom and getting closer to Indonesia, where the Homo floresiensis were found. And so this is a Obendorf, Oxnard, and Kefford. So these were promoting the idea in the early days of the Hobbit controversy that the Hobbit could be explained by hypothyroid cretinism. And I say this cretinism was a form of dwarfism present in Indonesia in recent times, and at high prevalent rates of up to 4.7% in Central Africa, and is an environmental disorder with potential to be maintained within a population indefinitely, unlike genetic dwarfisms that are subject to natural selection. So basically, I don't pretend that I don't have all the answers. And my thing is a working hypothesis. There may be better things to explain it, but one thing with cretinism, you don't have to wait for mutations to go through the population. It's just the environment, and natural selection can't get rid of it. It's just a matter of so it can explain why you get a certain percentage of people straight away with cretinism or whatever. If they live in an iodine deficient area, you don't have a waiting time problem. And so, and for other reasons as well, as we'll get to. And so they hypothesized that LB1 and LB6. So they're the two of the LB1 is the main individual which has the part of the skeleton and the skull. LB6 is also, I think it has a jaw and some other a shoulder blade and some other parts, some finger bones and stuff like that. They hypothesize that both these are cretins from an inland population are mostly unaffected modern humans, Homo sapiens. So they're basically born without a function thyroid due to environmental factors, including iron deficiency. And the resulting can lead to severe dwarfism and reduced brain size, but less severe mental retardation and motor disability than in neurological cretinism. So there is a great so this is a paper by Chen, 2010, revisiting cretinism. So there is a gradation effect of iron deficiency. So basically, the most serious and visible is the endemic cretinism, which occurs from about 1 to 10% in a severely iodine deficient population. Okay, so it's not the whole population; it's just a relatively small population, small part of that population will have it. Although, for whatever reason, it may be that those with cretinism may shelter a group together for whatever reasons. We don't know. So you could get a certain concentration, but overall, it's only going to be a small percentage that have it. But you haven't. The next gradation is that of less severe brain damage, and that this lesser effect is much more common, up to 30%, than gross cretinism. And so, as state there, it's already indicating China terms such as subcretin or cretinoid are used to describe these subjects. I don't know what the skeletal effects are on this sort of lesser graded group. And then you have what, apart from goiter, the less common, the more common effect is mental and physical energy or exhaustion due to hypothyroidism. So this can be reversed by iodine deficiency and things like that. So, right now, all the cretins, they're not all identical. So according to Oxnard, they're enormously more variable than unaffected humans in many features, as would be expected in a pathology with different degrees of effect and conflation of associated conditions. So there may be other conditions too. And I think even in the, as we get at Hominin samples, there may be other conditions at play too. And of course, all cretins, they're not identical. The effects of the deficiency vary at a greater or lesser degree. Their genetic heritages can also be expected to influence the picture. And most of the known cretins for which postmortem reports are available are from European populations. So we don't know that much about other populations. It's more the European ones. Now, as already is it now, the hypothyroidism can reduce brain size by approximately 50%, and may not do that at all. But that's what the thing is. That's what the Oxnard, Overnorth, Oxnard, and Kefford, right? And so they state, Oxnard state later in a paper following up, that there's normal Southeast Asian pigment crania from about 800 to 1,000 milliliters have been recorded and estimated. On this basis, cretin from such population could have brain size as small as 4 to 500 milliliters, based on scaling of height and brain size found among European endemic cretins. And so, and I don't believe it's a modern human cretin. I believe it's a sort of erectus type or robust human cretin. And we know that they, for some unknown reason, there's many with generally smaller brain size than the average human. Although there are some that actually have very large brain sizes, but they're not categorized erectors, because by definition these days, if a robust human has a large, with thick cranial walls and brow ridges and things like that, if they have that with a large brain, then they're kind of excluded by definition from erectus, and so they're called something like archaic or Homo sapiens or Homo heidelbergensis or something like that. So that's why, anyhow. But anyhow, if you have a Homo erectus population, which generally has small brain size anyhow, then it's easy to see how, if they had something like cretinism, that their brains, that if you reduce that a little bit further, and you get a brain size in the range of Homo floresiensis, and also in the range of Homo naledi. And on the right there, you can see that's a sort of modern human cretinism, aphoretic cretin. So it had a absent thyroid gland at birth, and so that its height was 0.85 meters. So it's a dwarfed cretin person there. Okay. And now another thing is, according to Oxnard, now Charles Oxnard, he's a hostile witness. He's an evolutionist, but he's a very knowledgeable person, you know, and knows a lot about bones, written a lot. So this guy is not a, yeah, you have to take seriously what he writes. And he states, it is remarkable that so many features similar to those normally present in great apes, in Australopithecus and Paranthropus, and in early Homo, for example, Homo erectus, and even to some degree Homo neanderthalensis, but not in modern Homo sapiens, are generated in humans by growth deficit due to the absence of thyroid hormone. In other words, many of the pathological features of cretinism mimic the primitive characters of evolution, making it easy to mistake pathological features for primitive characters. So bear that in mind, you know, and I'll go through at least a couple of things that some of the things that he explains. They look like features of evolution, but if you look more closely, you can explain it differently. Okay, so now we get to Homo floresiensis. Okay, so now on Thursday, 28th October 2004, there was headlines across the world about, such as from the Age newspaper in Australia, such as lost race of human hobbits unearthed on Indonesian island. And so that captured the imagination of the news media. And so this hoopla surrounding this new alleged species, officially named Homo floresiensis, was enormous. And if it was true, it'd probably be justified. You know, it's certainly big news, but it's a big if. This species has been really steeped in controversy from the word go. It's eased off a little bit, but we'll talk more about that later. And that's mainly because some of the participants in the controversy have passed away, and also they redated it to make it. Yeah, but we'll get to that. Okay. Now, the official publication occurred in Nature, and as I mentioned earlier, principal author was Peter Brown, a paleoanthropologist from the University of New England, Australia. He reconstructed a cranium of a type specimen LB1. Now, co-author was Michael Morwood, so he passed away about 10 years ago, and he was an archaeologist and a professor at the University of Wollongong, Australia. And he was the driving force behind the overall project. And without him, this odd specimens would not have been found. So here's the skull. Here's a cast of the skull. So basically from Liambua, is a limestone cave of Flores Island, Indonesia. It was discovered in 2003. Estimated cranial capacity is the latest one, or it's about 426. When they published it, it was a bit less. So they've done previous, subsequent estimates of it, and a little bit larger. Now, it's allegedly dated to between 100,000 to 60,000 years ago. Now, of course, I don't accept these dates, but I'll give them for, because out of interest and stuff like that. Now, it was initially dated to 18,000 years ago. And there's a section towards the end I'll discuss more on the dating, so I won't get into that now. And it's estimated to be about 106 centimeters in stature, so about the same height as Lucy. So what was Homo floresiensis? Now, there have been certain evolutionary explanation which has changed a bit. So when it was first published, it was a new dwarfed Homo erectus species, so basically some sort of island dwarfing hypothesis and limited resources or whatever, so basically shrunk in size over time. Some believe it was just a variant Homo erectus. Some believe it was a new species derived from Homo habilis, which I believe is just a phantom species, mainly made up of specimens that should be assigned to the genus Australopithecus, or a separate genus altogether, or it was derived from some Australopithecine like biped. I guess one of the problems of that is that no Australopithecine nor alleged Homo habilis specimen that have been found outside of Africa. So to be yeah, and so that would be the first one then, or something like that. But there's no trace of them outside Africa, and also the dwarfed Homo erectus hypothesis kind of gets a rebirth in 2011. So it's sort of come back again, although right now there's different people have different opinions on it. But that's just the evolutionary explanations. Okay, so there's been a lot of before the redating, there was a lot of possible human pathologies. Okay, and certainly one at top of the list was a human microcephaly. And certainly in the early days, I thought that was a plausible possibility. Laron syndrome, got an endemic cretinism, so that was proposed several years later. Down syndrome, been proposed, or an unspecified development mental abnormality, so that's hedging all bets, I suppose. And one guy, Richard, suggests basically a combined growth form insulin-like growth factor 1 axis modification mutation of the MCPH gene family. So a lot of different explanation, and there's probably more than that. And my goal is not to kind of try and explain all these things or contrast these positions. Just a drink. So basically, I'll just discuss some of the features of interest, and along with plausible explanations involving cretinism where relevant. Okay. Now, firstly, could cretinism have occurred in Flores? Now, in the Manggarai district of Flores, where the LB1 partial skeleton was found, the total goiter rate was 41% in 1998. This had increased by a further 11% to 52% by 2004. So that's from Charles Oxnard now. So he writes, the current goiter rates imply that poor indigenous hill groups in the Flores should have produced some cretins, though it must be emphasized that these have not yet been reported. Today's goiter rates imply that prior hunter-gatherers populations of the hills should have been severely iron deficient and would regularly have produced cretins. He goes on to say, Liangbu itself is a limestone cave, and nearby soils are alkaline and probably therefore iron deficient. Fish bones found at Liangbu are river fish that would be deficient in iodine. River waters in such regions are low in iodine. All these factors would have precluded access to iodine-rich seafoods. So at least in theory, it's certainly possible. Okay, so just to wanted to establish that. Now, just a note from someone else. John Allen writes in the Lives of the Brain. Taken as a whole, including both its morphology and provenance, the hobbit, that is Homo floresiensis, particularly the LB1 skeleton, fits about as well into accepted view of hominid evolution, especially with reference to cranial capacity, as the Piltdown hoax. Piltdown was a combination of a human cranium with an ape jaw, indicating a cranial expansion was relatively early among the mosaic of changes that combined to produce modern humans. The hobbit, if it is indeed non-pathological, challenges implicit assumption about the processes underlying hominid brain evolution. I think we'll get onto it later on, hopefully. A lot of the things coming out of the Rising Star cave system, similar challenge, a lot of old theories, and that I think that's why there's a lot of pushback to it from certain quarters, but we'll get back to that later. So now looking at the postcranial anatomy, sort of the not looking at the skull. Shoulders are not designed for climbing. If you there's a scapula not from the LB1 skeleton, but a different specimen. There's a scapula, and you can measure the angles, have an idea of the orientation of the shoulder joint, and it indicates that it wasn't particularly cranially orientated. So that indicates that it wasn't really designed for climbing. Now, feet are not used for grasping, but were very long. You had the toes. The big toe was aligned with the other toes, but they were very long, and we'll discuss that. Stature similar to Australopithecines, but also consistent with dwarfism, which is a feature of cretinism. Now, iliac ablative hip bones flare laterally in LB1. That lateral flaring is also a feature in cretinism. Now, LB1 shows increased robusticity of limb bones, and cretinism can give appearance of robusticity, and I think I discussed that too later. So let's just look at the foot of Homo floresiensis. So in one of the papers, the authors Morwood et al. State the foot of LB1 has a broad array of primitive traits that recall apes and some Australopithecines. And here you can see the upper part is the medial view, which has the kind of the big, where the big toe would be, but at least the metatarsal, first metatarsal is the nearest is kind of on the bottom or on the side there nearest to you, and dorsal view, which is the top view of the foot, and also shown in here with the right tibia and left femur and the bottom. Now, according to Jung, LB1's foot is exceptionally long relative to the femur and tibia, proportions never before documented in hominins, but seen in some African apes. Now, Oxnard has looked at that, and basically what it says is, though cretins have absolutely small feet, they have even shorter limbs, so that the ratios of foot length to leg length and lower ling length have values 76 to 84% and 35 to 43% similar to apes. Further, LB1 has ape-like metatarsal and phalangeal ratios and ape-like morphology of individual tarsal bones. Again, these same features are also found in cretins. It goes on to say, cretin bones are enormously variable. Some, especially in upper limb, are slender and with thin cortices, possibly relating to reduced physical activity. Others, especially in the lower limb, tend to be wider in relation to the lengths and thus appear more robust. This is partly because the reduction of the width of bones due to reduced appositional growth on bone surfaces is less than reduction of length of bones due to reduced multiplicative growth of cartilage at bone ends. Reduction of growth in general thus tends to reduce length more than width, giving rise to a spurious appearance of robusticity. Such a mixture of features is also evident in LB1. So basically, okay, go back to what appears to be some strange feet, or ape-like feet, look for different lenses, can explained by development pathology such as cretinism. And I emphasize again, Oxnard is an evolutionist, so it's a hostile listener. He's an expert on bones. So, you know, you don't need to take my word for it, but that's what he says. So let's look at another thing. Look at the hands. The wrist bones of the hand of LB1 have been described as being primitive, similar to those found in apes or Australopithecines, particularly the shape and small size of the trapezoid. So you can see the arrow there pointing to trapezoid bone, which is situated next to the index finger, the first finger next to the thumb, basically. Okay. Now, however, this primitive trapezoid shape is also seen in cretinism. According to Oxnard, the small trapezoids do, however, sometimes occur in adult human cretins because there may be delayed ossification of the ventral portion of the bone. So basically, when they ossify, it's different parts and they later come together. But so basically, there may be delayed ossification of the ventral portion of the bone in younger cretins, or failure of fusion of the two parts of the bone with loss of the small ventral portion after death. So it may not have fused by the time it died, and then that's been lost, and then it's been interpreted as a ape-like trapezoid. And he mentioned a young adult cretin shows exactly such an incomplete trapezoid, lacking a ventral tip adjacent to a normal capita. And that's from a basal specimen 84 male. So again, you look at it for a different lens, and it has a very different interpretation, you know. And you should do, because Hobbit is a very strange specimen, and so why shouldn't people consider pathology in these instances? And I already mentioned cretinism can reduce brain size to at least Oxford, I reckon, up to about 50% or something like that. So, and because you have um, crania in the region have been estimated to be between 800 and 1,000 mil, theoretically, it could explain the small cranial capacity or brain size of the Hobbit. Okay. Now, according to Keifu et al., who analysed the cranium of Homo floresiensis and other crania, LB1 is most similar to early Javanese Homo erectus from Sangerian and Trinul, and these and other aspects. We conclude that the craniofacial morphology of LB1 is consistent with the hypothesis that Homo floresiensis evolved from early Javanese Homo erectus with dramatic island dwarfism. So this is sort of I guess, the rebirth of the dwarfed Homo erectus hypothesis, that some features it aligns with it. So I've shown there a photo of the side view of the Hobbit skull and the Sangerian 17 Homo erectus skull from Java, which is supposedly dated 1.25 million years ago or whatever it is now. Those dates seem to change all the time. The alleged dates, that is. And again, this shows the LB1 Hobbit compared with the modern cretin skull. Like I said, I don't believe it's a I don't believe it's a modern human cretinism. I believe it's a rectus or robust type human cretinism. And it's interesting that there's a lot of people now, evolutionists, are suggesting that because of a lot of research into the Denisovans, that a lot of the Chinese fossils may be Denisovans, but also the Nangdong Homo erectus specimens might actually be Denisovans, and for a number of reasons. And of course, the Denisovans, and we know that from the DNA that they actually interbred with modern humans and Neanderthals, and so there's trace of Denisovan DNA in the inhabitants of Flores, the population there, but that they haven't found any sort of other archaic, so-called archaic, whatever, DNA represented in it. They found some trace of Denisovan and Neanderthal, but they also haven't analyzed. No one has analyzed it, been able to get DNA from Homo erectus or Homo floresiensis. So you could have that. So Flores. It could be that the Hobbit was a Denisovan, was also erectus, or it was a product of a modern human and a Denisovan, and something like that. So it's sort of so this is all. Hopefully, they can analyze more, get more ancient DNA which may help solve some of the mysteries. But unfortunately, they can't. It doesn't seem LB1 isn't kind of giving up its DNA sequence easily. Now, certainly in early days, the Homo flora, I may call it Hobbit easier. Hobbit was compared to considered to be microcephalic modern human, and here just shows a comparison of a modern microcephalic skull compared to Homo floresiensis. Okay, and Lewis looked at this, and one study, taking all these differences together, we conclude that the material from Lingenberg cannot be considered a microcephalic modern human. An alternative hypothesis that Albion is a microcephalic Homo erectus cannot be dismissed entirely, because such microcephalics would cluster with Homo erectus, just as microcephalic Homo sapiens cluster with the rest of Homo sapiens. So basically, what they found was that the cranial shape of LB1 is closer to that of Homo erectus and Geron 17 and not Homo sapiens. They say the overall cranial shape of LB1 appears to be very distinct from that of modern humans and closer to that of Homo erectus. The difference from Homo habilis is much smaller, but clearly larger than between Homo erectus and Homo floresiensis. Therefore, based on the available data, we may conclude that Homo floresiensis is morphologically closest to Homo erectus from Sengeron. Another microcephalic study found that Manusci et al. Found that LB1 endocasts fell largely outside the range of modern normal human and Homo erectus endocasts, but were within the range of microcephalic endocasts. And they state, given the available evidence, it is clearly premature to assign LB1 and associated skeletal finds to a distinct Homo species. The existence of a single skull and only a few mandibles provides many clues as to the type of hominid who inhabited Flores 12 to 18,000 years ago. Okay. So here we get to I'm not going to go into too much more on the whole of it except look at it dating, but the work by if you want to look more into that, in a book called Ghostly Muscles, Wrinkled Brains, Heresies and Hobbits, there's a lot on cretinism and Homo floresiensis there, where it goes through a lot of the features that are present, and there's several papers on it too, which are in the slide, so the people can read more about it there. But on the dating, initially they used various dating methods. Radiocarbon luminescence, uranium series, and electrospin resonance. And I said that Homo floresiensis existed from before 38,000 years ago until at least 18,000 years ago, which was the date LB1. And that Homo floresiensis originated from early dispersal of Homo erectus, including specimens referred to as Homo ergaster and Homo georgicus, which is the Dmanisi ones, that reached Flores and then survived in this island refuge until very recently. It overlapped significantly in time of Homo sapiens in the region, but we do not know if or how the two species interacted and things like that. So now what happened is that, and so because I'll get back to it, because it overlaps significantly in time of Homo sapiens in the region, then it gave room for people to suggest that human pathologies are modern humans, because they would be in the region too. But when they redated it, then it put the kind of more out of reach of explaining at least this pathology of modern human, at least for those that subscribe to evolutionary theory. So the initial ages were discarded in 2016. And new techniques, including uranium thorium, infrared stimulated luminescence dating, thermoluminescence, radiocarbon dating on charcoal, and argon methods. And basically, so they found that ages that basically did suggest that Homo floresiensis survived until long after modern human reached Australia by they were dated to about the initial dating was that survived to about long after the 50,000 years, and that basically the new dates basically didn't support these ages, and so that the date for the holotype LB1 at 18,000 years was wrong. And so instead, the skeletal remains of Homo floresiensis in a deposit containing them were said to be dated to about 100,000 and 60,000 years ago, whereas stone artifacts attributable to this species were said to range from about 190,000 to 50,000 years ago. In the state where Homo floresiensis survived about 50,000 years ago, potentially encountering modern humans of Flores or other hominins dispersing throughout Southeast Asia, such as Denisovan, is an open question. So whatever the justification, it sort of made it harder now to basically present to the hobbits to say that they were pathological modern humans. And I just go some of the reason for redating it. I don't know whether it's right or wrong. I might skip that part. Now, so basically, the LB1 specimen, which was dated supposedly previously to 80,000 years, yet now it's about 60 to 100,000 years ago. So it prepares to predate the arrival of Homo sapiens in the region, although that changes all the time too, according to evolutionary timeline. So that makes it difficult to hobbits to have a pathological modern human. Now, whatever the justification for the redating, the New Age range was certainly convenient to those believing Homo floresiensis represents a new hominin species. And as indicated by Carolyn Gramling in an article, she writes that new, much older date range of Homo floresiensis makes it impossible to argue that it's a pathologically dwarfed modern human, says Russell Gion, who's a paleoanthropologist at the University of Iowa in Iowa City, who was not involved in the study. In my opinion, this paper drives the final nail in the coffin of that hypothesis. So, so you can see why you don't hear much about it, because that's mainly the reason why, or maybe certainly one of the reasons why. Now, so now where did those evolutionists who advocate the pathological modern human hypothesis were silent by new dating? It's unclear, but it may have likely to have some effect. But they have been quiet since. But from my point of view, and as a creationist, I reject his dates, and so it doesn't really have any bearing on my interpretation of the Hobbit. But the redating just illustrates the fickle nature of age estimates obtained from dating methods, as does the comment on it by John Hawkes, as I should have used a capital J in there, who's a prominent paleoanthropologist, and he's involved in the Naledi study. He writes, a new understanding of the stratigraphy of Liangbu is just one step in this process, and we should expect that the geological age of these fossils will continue to be refined. Indeed, the most current result may itself turn out to be wrong, and we'll need to change ideas again. Stranger things have happened before, much stranger. So probably, so who knows what the dates will be in the future, but that's sort of what kind of happens. So the most likely scenario is that what I believe is the most likely is that Homo floresiensis, the Hobbit, was a robust time human, so erectus-like, or whether you call it Heidelbergensis-like or Neanderthal-like or whatever, but it had cretinism, okay? And it could even have been ancestry of a robust human and a modern human. We just don't know. You can't rule out modern human cretinism, microcephaly. It's a possibility, but I think it unlikely. If it's a microcephalic, it's probably more likely to be a microcephalic Homo erectus, because that fits more the shape of the skull, which is sort of tends to group with erectus. Okay, that's just some figures of stature and stuff like that. So basically, that concludes this. The next is Homo naledi. I'll just put it back to Donny for a second. You're still there, Donny?
Yes, very good.
Okay. So I'm just sorry. Yeah. So I'll just switch to the slide. So now on Homo naledi.
Sure, I can give you a couple questions that have come in. Very comprehensive. That was great, and I feel like that is exactly what we need as Young Earth Creationists. Is we need comprehensive explanations going through the primary source data, as you've done, and so a lot of questions of clarification in the audience, Peter.
Okay.
So I guess my question, in light of that, you're basically arguing, rather than Hobbit being a pre-human evolutionary ancestor with basal or primitive traits, you're arguing that those traits are characteristic of pathology and disease rather than evolution.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. You look at it from different lenses. In fact, it's not even me. I I'm using the argument on an expert. You know, Oxnard knows a lot more about bones than I do, so I'm using his arguments.
Right.
But he knows a lot, so they're the one arguing for it, and I'm just using the arguments. But as I say, I'm looking at whether that's a plausible explanation from hominidity as well, but which I'll later look at. But yeah, that's the essential story of it. Yeah, that they would argue that it was a modern human with pathology, with cretinism. I argue that probably it's more likely that it was a rectus-like or Denisovan rectus, whatever you want to call them, type human with some pathology, and cretinism may well explain it. That's what I'm arguing. And if you look at the bones from a different perspective, you can explain it. That's
In
what
that
I'm arguing.
quote you showed on screen from Oxnard that you're talking about, he said many of the pathological features of cretinism mimic the primitive characters of evolution, making it easy to mistake pathological features for primitive characters. I think that is incredibly revealing, Peter.
Yeah, is it? I got on the screen now.
Yes, let's put it up for the audience.
Yeah.
Could you reiterate the importance of that quote for the audience, Peter?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that, like with the big feet, were interpreted as some sort of evolutionary thing or whatever, or because the legs were shorter and whatever, it's interpreted as a more loosely like Australopithecine like. But he explains, it's a result of both have been reduced in growth, but the length of the limb bones, the length of it is reduced more than the width of it, and the same with the feet. Basically, so the feet have shortened by less than the length of the limb bones, because of the nature of the disease, because it slows the rate growth. The rate of growth is slower at the ends of the limb bones than it is in the width and stuff like that, and then in the feet. So that means that proportionally the feet look larger, even though overall they may be smaller than a normal human. If I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. So that's sort of you got to look at how what parts of the bone is slowed down in growth. The absence of thyroid hormone is essential for normal growth in tissue and the skeleton, and basically, and so it affects the growth of the skeleton. But not all the skeleton grows at the same rate, and so some bones in the skull, there's the membranes fused between, in the cranium, it's membranes that fuse together. You have the sutures and the membranes fuse together as you grow into adulthood. In the long bones, you have this sort of cartilage at the ends that kind of end up fusing and stops growth. So there's different things that grow, and different things grow at different rates. The face, the lower face grows differently than the upper face, and so there's all these little things to take into account.
What would be a good response to evolutionary critics of our position that would say, well, the pathology we see today in modern humans, extant humans, is different than the type of traits or features that we see in what they would say are primitive humans like Hobbit floresiensis, and so it can't be due to pathology, it must be due to evolution rather, Peter?
Well, I think I just used the Oxnard was actually arguing it was a pathological modern human. So basically, I don't know. So they, and in fact, all the pathology explanations by evolutionists have been that it was a modern human.
That's a good point.
Pretty much nearly all of them. So I think that counters that. You have the same pathologies. You have the same pathologies occurring in both modern and these robust humans. And there's a lot of things about what you call modern humans, but I don't think I can't go into today. But if I ever get to talk about Homo erectus, because how you define modern humans is may not be as simple as you think. Who you include in it, because people think that modern humans are the vertical forehead and rounded occipital, hardly any brow ridges. That just doesn't hold. if you define it like that, you're going to exclude a lot of people. So you have to be very careful how you actually, so what so defining things, it's not that simple. And the post-cranial skeleton of the robust humans, well, not, were very similar to, there's some differences in some specimen, but they were all very similar to modern humans. And
Right.
there's a lot of variation, and it's mainly the skull features, that are different. Like in Homo erectus, it's more the skull that's the question. It's not really the postcranial skeleton so much.
The flared iliac blade on
Yeah,
the Homo floresiensis
yeah.
specimen, you're saying that could also be due to pathology and disease?
Well, yeah, it is actually known to be due to pathology and disease, but I qualified it. That is also the flaring. The no, the hominidis is flared too. That
Right.
and according to one author, well, discussing the hominidid, the one difference is that the surface of the ilia, in some are more in hominidis it's flat. In the hobbit, it's more curved. And it's also flared in a Neanderthal specimen and a specimen of Homo heidelbergensis from the Cimidilla huesus site. The pelvis is flared, but they have a concave ilium, more concave ilium. So it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to know actually the importance of that feature because whether the flaring alone is enough to say it was pathological. It's hard to say, but certainly, yeah. In diseases in modern humans, you don't. Well, so when I say modern human, yeah. But generally speaking, it tends not to be as flared. It tends to curve around the side more in modern humans and things like that. But in some of the robust human, it's a bit more flared in some, but not all. So it can be a bit of variation there as well. And the variation may not be due to pathology.
Right. Since some of your Australopithecine specimens also have that flaring pelvis, could that also be due to pathology in an ape-like creature, or would you argue that that is just a normal trait or
I
feature
think
with
it's
your
more. I think it's
Australopithecine?
more normal. It's the pattern you see.
Okay.
Um, I think most of them have that sort of flat. They have the flaring, the flatness, and the orientation of blades are more kind of coronally oriented or more forward facing. It doesn't curve around as much. Uh, whereas so there's a little bit of a difference there, and certainly a size difference between like a Neanderthal and a Australopithecine. And so I think that relates to other. It also relates, yeah, to other features of anatomy about and so. But look, it's a complex thing. So yeah, one has to
Right.
be one has to be careful. But yeah, but the anyhow, we'll probably get back to that when discuss hominidity.
Yeah, I'm trying to refrain from asking questions related to Homo naledi. So I guess one or two final questions on Floresiensis. You have argued that essentially you'd have a parent population of robust humans like Erectus, and then a daughter population or a subpopulation broke off, became isolated on the island of Flores, and as a result, these pathological features manifested in that specific group rather than the entire Erectus group, Peter.
Yeah, if Erectus is found in Java, there's no Erectus fossils found in. There are a lot of stone tools, and there's other fossils found. Also, small specimens found on Flores, but there's no not there's no skulls like found on Java, like the Nangdong Homo erectus or Sanjian erectus that are
Mm.
found on. So 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 it may so it so I believe some erectus must have gotten, whether it's erectus or it may well be Denisovans, because of Denisovans and erectus may be the same. And there's
Right.
various groups of Denisovans as well. It's not just one group. There's at least three of them. So basically, so that they could have been migrated to Flores. Some of them could have gone there, and there's also later there's also, more, if you call them modern human populations, there have come in as well, and with it interbreeding and stuff. So there's a lot of complex interactions and things like that. And they have examined the DNA in the pygmy population, because there's a small uh, there's a population there
Right.
of pygmies, generally small in stature, and I don't find any. They say there's no trace of any strange archaic there. There's traces of Denisovan and Neanderthal DNA. But the thing is, they don't know what the Flores DNA or the Hobbit DNA or Homo erectus DNA look like. So it may well be that was Denisovan. So
Right.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Don't they
So
find on the island of Flores, Peter, other dwarfed creatures like elephants?
yeah, they may well. Yeah, well, I think in the initial paper, yeah, there may be some stuff like that. Yeah. So
Is there
there's
something
strange
about,
effects.
is it something about these island conditions that result in this type of reductive evolution, for lack of a better term?
Well, yeah. Well, look, it's whether it's some sort of epigenetic effect in these animals, that sort of come upon sort of starvation conditions. I don't know how that would apply to humans, but certainly there's some that are small in size. But I
Right.
don't really want to comment too much about it, because genetics isn't really my uh, kind of expertise of how that actually would occur. So I probably don't want to get into too deep of waters about that. But that was a theory that I believe there was a island dwarfing, and basically erectus shrank, and that was it. I don't know how plausible that is in terms of how genetics. But the thing is, I don't think the skull wouldn't. I don't think in Hobbit it would. You'd expect it to, you know, um, brain size is related to body size, but certainly not in a modern human. It wouldn't. The Hobbit hasn't shrunk proportionally, and even the Homo erectus hasn't shrunk proportionally. So there's probably something else there going on. Even if it did shrink, it probably, you expect the skull to be a little bit larger. So to me, it seems like
What
something pathological.
is the possibility of a smaller brain size the result of selection favoring the smaller brain size in order to preserve energy and resources on an island where resources and food and so on are limited? Peter, what are your thoughts on that?
I, I don't really. Well, I don't think it's a sort of selection thing, and I kind of I think I don't think I'm not really that believe that much in that, in a resource thing. I don't know how why would get that small. To me, it does seem like pathological
Right.
in that it is small. It may well have been functional. I don't know how mentally functional it was. And maybe initially in the reports, it was basically, they were saying it had made all these tools and fires and stuff. And I think they're drawing it back a bit about the fires and other things. So I know, so I don't know how mentally proficient it was. We just don't know. But we know that, the brain. If you have a small body, you don't need a large brain, because a lot of areas of brain are dedicated to, getting information from receptors around the body, and also from the the motor cortex, that controls all the muscles in the body. So you may need less area for that with your smaller body, and that's a lot. Well,
I
whales
guess
and
for the
elephants don't have
Hobbit,
brains.
I guess for the Hobbit ancestors to get onto the island in the first place could be
Mm.
evidence of them being a sophisticated people group, since wouldn't that be evidence of purposeful navigation in order to even get to the island?
Definitely. I don't think one of the problems they have is how do they get there? And it's
Right.
not just sort of falling on a raft and accidentally getting a raft and getting there. There'd have to be lots of people, and the way the currents move and stuff like that. It's all it's not, it may not be, it's not as simple as it sounds, and things like that. But yeah, it indicates they had navigated a watercraft, and it's not as easy as it sounds, and um, so I certainly believe that although the initial population likely may have been sort of erectus, robust type humans or
Right.
Denisovans, and whatever happened, like I said, the cretinism can reduce brain size considerably, and if you already have a population with erectus tend to have smaller brains, then that could have happened, or things like that, and yeah, but that that what some of what you're saying about whether there was some really adverse effect, environmental effect, caused some sort of selection for small brain. Maybe it's possible. I don't know, but I think I think the thing is the problem is you need the genes there. So I don't think the waiting time problem. That it applies to creationists too. So I think only sort of that would have to be in an epigenetic sense where you don't have something like that which is inbuilt into the genome, something like that, rather than yeah. But
I think
anyhow,
your point, Peter, on the purposeful navigation, because I'll ask you this question, then we can move on to the next part of your presentation. There's so much good information here, as usual, Peter. I've heard some paleoanthropologists or students of paleoanthropology argue that Floresiensis was an Australopithecine that made its way to the island. But an Australopithecine, we would all agree, was not a sophisticated creature. And so how would it have to be an accidental?
It doesn't work. The thing is, no Australopithecine or some of those, I believe Homo habilis was essentially Australopithecines too,
right,
except for a couple of mixed in erectus specimens, which are sort of only partial skulls or whatever. But the thing is, none of those fossils have been found outside Africa. So that's a sort of so that'd be the first time. And yeah, they would have had ape-like intelligence. I don't believe they were. I don't classify them as apes because I think that there were some differences. I look at them as an extinct apish primate group, a bit like monkeys are not classified as apes either. So I put them in a separate category altogether. But they would have been similar intelligence to what we call apes, and so I don't see that how they wouldn't have been able to build the watercraft or things like that. And so it would have to be accidental. But I think that's too. I don't believe in too many big coincidences. So I don't think that's plausible at all. And I think there's features in why some are drawn back to dwarf erectus is there's features they found like I haven't got the information in front of me, but there's certain features they found when examining whether it's a jaw or a skull, but that indicate links to some to erectus, which couldn't have come from the Australopithecines or something like that, which means that kind of excludes the Australopithecines. So I think there's morphological reasons as well for not, the thing is, if you look at the jaw of the Hobbit, is it's not Australopithecine like at all.
Right.
It's more, it's very, it's much more human like, and things, it's gracile and things like that, and the face and things like that. So it's not an Australopithecine type skull and things like that.
I
So that
agree with
it's
you.
only its size basically, and some odd features that can be explained by pathology and things like that.
Well, I think you made a good point that erectus already has a small brain. Hobbit has a smaller brain, and so it wouldn't take much due to pathology and disease for an erectus brain to get a little bit smaller, like we see in Hobbit. And one final question, actually, Peter, based on your previous presentation, part 1, again, which was comprehensive, Homo habilis, you're arguing, is essentially a wastebasket taxon, then mostly Australopithecine with some erectus bones mixed in. Okay,
that's right.
Okay, Peter. Well, I think this was a good Q&A session. If you'd like, we can move on to the second part.
I'll go to home and and I'll just find it in the slide sort of where I start. So I just
and that's the more controversial one, Naledi. There's a lot of talk these days in the world of paleoanthropology with Lee Berger, and so I think this should be interesting.
That's probably it's the most controversial. Have you got the full screen there?
Yes.
Yeah. That probably this is probably the most controversial specimen I've come across, and it's probably one of the most difficult to sort. And the one thing good about it is that the way these guys do their science paleoanthropology is they kind of share their data a bit and make it available so you can show slides at least if they're published in places like eLife and stuff like that. And so whilst of course obviously I don't agree with their interpretation, I like, in a sense, I like the way they do the science open access, and they make it interesting for people as well. So my disagreement with them is not personal, but it's is I have a different worldview, but I like the way they share data and things like that. But anyhow, but I'll start the presentation, okay? And before I start, I'll just say this is a working hypothesis. I don't claim to know all information. It may well turn out to be wrong. There may be some other explanation, and I hope it encourages people to look at it. To look at the data and see. And there's a lot of data there, and I haven't been able to look for everything. This is just a sample of some of the data, some of the main things that are things, but there may be other things there that certainly are mixed. But anyhow, so on Thursday, 10th of September, 2015, paleoanthropologist Lee Berger from Wits University, South Africa, along with a team of international scientists, they announced the discovery of the new species Hominin. And I wrote there, I find that brought even more perplexity to fields still reeling from trying to make sense of other finds such as the Debunking Homo erectus fossil collection, particularly Skull 5, and also, as I've just talked about, Homo floresiensis. And I had not anticipated such a puzzling find, be honest. And so the announcement of the new species was represented by at least 15 individuals based on a collection of 1,550 fossil elements, and it was published in the journal eLife. Now, bear in mind that a lot of the stuff here, when you look at things, the thing is, there's 15 individual, and a lot of stuff are commingled. You don't know whether some are associated, some bones are not associated. So features in one thing may not be. You may be looking at different individuals, but you don't know. So this is the problem. This is the thing with it. And so I look at it. Could it be explained by cretinism? And cretinism only affect if it's an affected area. Only basically affects a small percentage of the population, but you could be possibly sheltered together as a group, common ground or whatever, for whatever reason. So there's a lot of things, and there's lot of, we don't know how long did time I spent in the cave, although the recent finding indicates, basically we'll get to, that they seem now to who have occupied the caves seem to use fire a lot, even cooking. They seem to even be a hearth there, and cooking and things like that, food there. So they may have spent a lot more time in the cave than we first thought. What we should first when it was initially published. Anyhow, so they described the morphology of these fossils, and also a companion paper, Dirks, described the physical context of the Dinaledi chamber within the rising star system where the fossils are found. And at the time, there was certainly a lot of mystery surrounding how did the fossil material get into the Dinaledi chamber, with occupation, predator accumulation, water transport hypotheses generally ruled out, but mass mortality or death trap and deliberate body disposal scenarios that were considered plausible. And the latter explanation was preferred by the authors. And that was at the time. Now, there may be more information now has come out, but that was at the time of publishing. And you can see here that there's a sort of anatomical mosaic, and they describe the skeleton as this anatomical mosaic is reflected in different regional skeletons. So the morphology of the cranium, mandible, as the jaw and dentition is mostly consistent with genus Homo. Although when people say genus Homo, to me that doesn't tell me much, because Homo includes Homo habilis, which I regard as mostly Australopithecine. So that doesn't really. But if they mean Homo erectus and Homo sapiens and stuff, then it's more informative. But anyhow, the brain and size of hominin lives in the range of Australopithecus. So the lower limb is largely Homo-like, and the foot and ankle are particularly human in their configuration, but the pelvis appears to be flared markedly like that of Afarensis. The wrist, fingertips, and portion of the fingers are shared mainly with Homo, but the proximal and intermediate manual phalanges are markedly curved, even to a greater degree than in any Australopithecus. The shoulders are configured largely like those of Australopithecus. The vertebrae are most similar to Pleistocene members of the genus Homo, so that whereas rib cage is wide distally like Afarensis. So there's a lot of things there. So we're going to try and look at some of the things. And I note that when studying this phone, you should remember that the analysis is based on multiple individuals, as is a skeleton. And in the next slide I'll show, it's a composite fossil. It's a composite skeleton which represent multiple individuals. It's also based on the assumption that the fossil material represents a single species and not a commingled assemblage. And given the location of finds, this assumption is probably valid. I think it is still valid. Okay, there shows you some of the fossils that were found that were initially published. And so this figure includes approximately all of the material incorporated in the diagnosis, including the holotype specimen, paratypes, and inferred material. It makes up about 737 partial or complete anatomical elements. The skeleton layout in the center photos are composite elements that represent multiple individuals. So you have to bear that in mind. You're not looking at the same when you're not analyzing this. It's not the same skeleton with different parts, different individuals. You don't know. So you don't know. So it makes it a little bit. Now, I indicated before, the blue arrow indicates the location of a narrow goiter belt stretching for 300 miles across Transvaal from Searest and west through what is around as far as Nelspruit in the east. Okay, so this belt is in the vicinity of the cradle humankind area of South Africa, where the rising star cave site is located. So this down the bottom, you can see that circle with X in it. That's where the cradle of humankind in South Africa area is located. So I try to bring them up. But you can see it's sort of comparing to, and if I put a Google map, you can see that the triangles indicate some of the places that they say were goiter areas. Okay, and in the bottom you can see the cradle of humankind area. So if it's not in the belt, it's very close to the belt. Okay, so in the past there was a problem with goiter there, and as we talked about, if there's a heavy infestation of or prevalence of goiter in a region, that it may be expected that you get a certain percentage of population may have cretinism. This just shows you the cradle of humankind. It shows you where the rising star cave system is located. Okay, it's sort of a few kilometers away from Sterkfontein. Swartkrans is about 800 meters from the rising star system, which I mentioned that because we'll mention a fossil that later. Okay, so the holotype specimen was I presume male called Denledi hominin 1 DH1, and it's kind of shown here. And composed of partial calvaria, partial maxilla, nearly complete mandible. Okay, and its cranial capacity estimated at 560 cubic centimeters. All right, so you can see the mandible there. It's not. I typically have a U-shaped mandible. Sorry, dental arcade. It's a dental arcade in the mandible. It's generally U-shaped. That is more parabolic there. I'm not sure where there's any deformation in it, but it generally looks more parabolic there. Now, and so when I published, Stringer had an accompanying, Chris Stringer, probably most people would have heard of him. He's a prominent paleoanthropologist, evolutionist. So he had an accompanying article in eLife, and he labeled it as having a relatively high and thin skull and small teeth. He said, overall, to my eye, the material looks most similar to small body examples of Homo erectus from Dmanisi, Georgia, which have been dated at about 1.8 million years old. And the Berger paper stated that compared to samples Homo habilis, Homo rudolfensis, and Homo erectus, the teeth in Hominidea are comparatively quite small, similar in dimensions to much later samples of Homo. So that would be more, I guess, much later samples of Homo. So that would be things that Heidelbergensis erectus or sapiens. Well, it'd be in that grouping, because Homo habilis existed only in their timeline. That was in earlier, would have been earlier Homo. Having small teeth is a feature of modern humans, as is having a high and thin skull. The cranial vault of Homo naledius described by Berger as having only slight postorbital constriction. The mandibular dental arcade is parabolic, as parabolic in shape, and the mandibular body as being relatively gracile. These features of the skull do not align with the Australopithecines, but rather indicates that it's a human skull, albeit not an anatomically modern human skull. So in the National Geographic, the general shape of the skull of the composite male hominoid skull is said to have been advanced, and it was labeled as a humanesque skull. Now, when asked whether Hominidea could be considered as a new species without dating, paleoanthropologist Tim Wright responded, and I probably have to say that in fairness, Tim Wright is probably not a big fan of Lee Berger, so bear that in mind. But anyhow, he said dating is irrelevant. These are a small primitive Homo erectus, whatever the date turns out to be. This is because they're not biologically different in any significant way from already known Homo erectus found in places like Swartkrans, 800 meters away, Eastern Africa, or the Georgian Republic. In other words, as it says above, the newly described species is an example of artificial species inflation in paleoanthropology. Now, regardless of whether it is classified as Homo erectus or not, the form of the skull appears to be within human variation. The hair human variation encompasses a combined range of both modern and robust humans, and robust humans, that's something what I call robust humans, cruise the range of broadly defined Neanderthals, Heidelbergensis, and erectus. However, it does have a very small cranial capacity. Now, the skull that Tim White was referring to in Swartkrans, which is about 800 meters away, is very likely SK847 cranium, and that's been affiliated both Homo erectus and Homo habilis. It's mainly just the face that is preserved, part of the face. It likely had a very small cranial capacity. So alleged data being about 1.5 to 2 million years ago. And Ronald Clark, who's actually the one that also discovered Littlefield, he stated in 1995 that they were kind of say whether 847 had a brain size like that of Homo habilis or early Homo erectus. The erectus-like morphology of the frontal bone, which is not seen in any of the Homo habilis crania, plus the remarkable overall similarity to 3733, convinces me that 847 must now be classified as an early Homo erectus. Just take a ring. This shows the 373 crania from Q4 Kenya, discovered in 95, cranial capacity 848 cubic centimeters, alleged date about 1.78 million years ago. And that's shown. It probably doesn't tell you much because maybe they're not quite the same angle, and not all parts are preserved. And the best comparison, if you look on the side view of it, you can see they're very similar. But I don't have a picture of that I can show actually. But that's the comparison there. Now, more recently, there's also been, because we're talking about Homo erectus in that region, there's been another in 2015 and reported in 2020. There's another erectus skull found, or classified Homo erectus, a juvenile one called DNH134, that a full ever Homo erectus dated to close to around 2 million years ago, allegedly, and according to the author Harrius et al., it represents the oldest fossil affinities to Homo erectus in the world. And it's said to have an estimated cranial capacity of 538 cubic centimeters. But because there's a juvenile, they estimate age about 2 and 3 years. And so if you use a model that it's human basically then they estimate it would reach an adult cranial capacity between 588 and 661 cubic centimeters, according to a human model. So already in the area, not in a rising star system, but the Jamolin is about probably more 6, 7 or so, or 8, something like that, kilometers away from rising star. But it's in this sort of area. So already you have specimens that seem likely to be Homo erectus with small brain capacities in the general area already. Okay, now forget about the dates, but I don't accept the dates. But you see, have these specimens already in the area. And while we're on small erectus cranial capacity, I just mentioned this other one too, which is the smallest adult erectus cranium known from Africa, and that was discovered in 2000, but it was only reported back in what's the date of the site, in 2020. Okay, so that's an adult cranium Dan 5P1 from Ghana, Ethiopia. So that's allegedly dated to about 1.6 to 1.5 million years ago, and that a cranium has to be at 588 cubic centimeters, and that's classified as Homo erectus, and the smallest erectus known crania from Africa. Okay. And that interesting of that is that here we report it was found in direct association, not just mode 1 tools, but mode 2 tools. So that's the Achillean sort of hand axis and stuff like that. And so usually whilst the Alderman tools, monkeys bashing rocks can unintentionally produce Alderman type tools. The hand axis, the Achillean tools, mode 2 tools, that would have to be delivery designed, and that indicates human activity. So this likely was human. It was so it's human. So either it made it or someone else in the population made these tools. And even as I mentioned last time, I talked about Daniel Lyon, who had a cranial capacity in the mid to high 600 cubic centimeters. It was a normal human with normal intelligence, okay? A modern human with normal intelligence in that range. So you can't say that. So theoretically, this person could be normal intelligent. Doesn't. So the brain size doesn't necessarily, because it's got a small brain, doesn't necessarily mean it is pathological, or it wasn't, or it was unintelligent. Okay. So I just wanted to basically state that. And particularly in Homo erectus, it does seem to be a preponderance of erectus specimens with smaller cranial capacities. I'm not sure why, but just from observation, although there are ones, erectus type specimens, whether they classify them or not, that have much larger cranial capacities. And so I talk about that more when I discuss Homo erectus, but there are erectus type cranial, like Su Chang from China, a cranial capacity of 1800 cubic centimeters, and there's others too. Very robust cranium, not classified as erectus, that have large cranial capacities. Anyhow, so here we get to the Hominin. So that's the composite skull that was presented to the world at the time, and so basically, I'm just showing the white parts there because the kind of the mid face region was kind of missing. So I have my own cast of it here, but I just wanted to show that because what's missing. And then I have, this is the couple of years later. It's actually not a composite, but a cast of an adult individual skull was published, and that's from the Lesedi chamber of the Rising Star System. And this the LES1 skeleton, also nicknamed Neo, and so basically that had a cranial capacity estimated about 610 cubic centimeters. So that's within the kind of erectus range of the other erectus specimens in the area, and also the one in Ethiopia. Okay, so just what I showed there now. So you can see the comparison there. Now you notice the mid-face region that was missing for the composite one. You can see there its mid-face seems to be a lot shorter. So that, I guess they didn't have the information there. The other one, it looks a lot more prognathous. If you look at the in the paper where they publish it, it shows this. You can see there the skull. Now, what's interesting, you can see where the maxilla bone joins the nasal bone. That's the only real part that the sort of the bottom or mid face downwards is actually connecting with the other parts of the skull. So I don't know so you could, where do you tip it a bit, and that changes the mid face prognathism, or how it projects forward, and it could change the angle a bit. I don't know. So that's just an observation. Now, so in addition, so a couple of years later, they published on the LSC1 skeleton, and most of the, and I noticed that most of the adult postcranial material belongs to the same individual. The adult cranial and postcranial main is shown here. They say, so the possibility that the femur represent two adult individuals makes unclear which femur may be attributable to the skeleton. So they only showed basically the left femur there, but what's preserved of it. And this is sort of where it gets a little bit interesting. There's according to Hoekstra, the two femoral fragments are different in muscle attachment and diaphyseal morphology to the extent that would represent unusual asymmetry in a single individual. Hence, the inference of two adults. So they're suggesting that was it shown there was two adults in there, but it was based on the morphological incongruence of these left and right femoral elements, as there was no adult element. There's no adult element they say it is clearly duplicated in the collection. So basically, you have this adult skeleton found there has the left and right femur. There's no duplicate elements, but because the right femur, if it was combined, it would have to be such an unusual, basically asymmetry for a single individual that they propose that there must have been a second individual there. On the other hand, does that indicate, even in this one, which is a little bit more robust than the others, is this indicates some sort of abnormality in the skeleton? And now the dating of when it was initially published, there was no date for the Hominin material, but in basically they in 2017 when they published the material from the Lesedi chamber, they also published a date and basically using different methods. And so by combining the uranium series electrospin resonance maximum age estimate obtained from TIP with the uranium age of the oldest flowstone overlying hominin fossils, I say we have constrained the possible age of hominin to a period between 236 and 330,000 years ago. What's interesting is that three weathered hominin bone fragments were radiocarbon dated, providing ages of 33,000 and 35,500 years, or dated to that time ago. The age of the third sample is not given. And they say that tests did not support cremation, indicate extensive secondary calcium carbonate replacement had occurred, providing or calcite had occurred, providing ages of 33 and 35,000 for two of the fragments. We interpret these ages to relate to late calcite precipitation in the bones that may reflect a wet period in the cave. So these ages are considerably younger than what the researchers considered the most parsimonious age estimate for the Naledi fossil, for the hominin fossils, which is something between 236 and 335,000 years ago, allegedly. Now, this description in age results between different methods does little to dispel concerns that the dates obtained all depend on which radiometric method you use to assess the fossil's age. Now, prior to obtaining an age, Hawkes and Berkeley considered Homo naledi more primitive than Homo erectus. So they stated, we maintain that etymology of Homo naledi places it in a position primitive of Homo erectus. And if we accept this position, then Homo naledi lineage must have existed earlier than the first occurrence of Homo erectus around 1.8 million years ago. They also state the most disruptive scenario of three possibilities, in my opinion, is a recent date for the denominated hominins. This scenario requires a long survival of Homo naledi alongside other species of Homo and Australopithecus, possibly into the late Pleistocene or even Holocene. Such a scenario would further complicate our ability to associate material cultures with specific hominin species and would question the validity of many attributions of known hominin fossil remains. So even though it was 200 to 300,000 years ago, that was relatively late in evolution terms. So I don't know whether that's the most disruptive scenario, but it probably isn't the scenario they may have wanted for the fossils, because it has become a sort of difficult. It doesn't actually fit any scenario really. So basically, and I've got here, it seemingly sidelined Naledi to being a more curiosity on the evolution storyline. Amazing, one prominent paleoanthropologist, Bernard Wood, he is quoted as saying that he thinks Homo naledi branched off from other humans relatively recently and then evolved to look more primitive. Its primitive features might be misleading, he says. So it goes on. For instance, Southern Africa may have been relatively isolated from the rest of the continent, says Wood. Lack of competition from other humans could have relaxed the pressure on Homo naledi to grow a large brain. If the skeleton no longer had to bear the weight of a heavy skull, features like the hips and shoulders might have reverted to become more like those of a small-brained hominin. So I got such mental gymnastics highlight that rather than being an example of ape-man transition, Naledi's peculiar mix of features is puzzling to evolutionists. The primitive features of Homo naledi, rather than be explained by evolutionary reversals, are more plausibly explained by pathology or pathologies, perhaps involving cretinism. So if you think that Naledi supports evolution, well, you just got to look at what prominent evolutionists like Bernard Wood is saying. That basically it doesn't. They have to have a reversal. It's actually evolving to be from more modern. It's evolving to be more primitive. Okay, so you know, so the problem is that, and the problem with any evolution is the waiting time problem to get all these mutations to come back in. So now that you have to get mutations to make it more primitive again. So how long does this take? It's all, it's an impossible scenario. Yes, just have another drink. So here you can see the Homo naledi foot, or foot one. So basically, that's the sort of, so that they're kind of found in association. Okay, so that's the foot one, the dorsal view, superior view from the top, and then you have the side view on the bottom. It's a medial view. So basically the toe, big toe is closest to the screen. Now, in the initial paper, an earlier paper, the Berger team stated the foot and ankle are particularly human in their configuration. Essentially, the only traits of its foot regarded as primitive was evidence suggesting of a lower arch foot, flatter feet with a more plantarly positioned and horizontally inclined medial palm than typically found in modern humans. Although even this is now, even the flat foot, as I'll discuss, a study shows that probably didn't even have flat foot. So that's one less thing. Now, in a paleontologist Will Harcourt Smith, lead author on a publication on Homo naledi foot, stated that it is essentially the foot of a modern human, but subtly different. But even if it does have flat foot, which now it's in doubt, or not slightly flat foot, that's a frequently encountered pathology in pediatric and adult human populations. So, and it's not regarded as a primitive condition in modern humans. So it's possible present in the foot of hominidity. It's probably not that significant. Okay, this is a diagram of the foot in case I need to refer to it. So Harcourt Smith in their publication on the hominidae foot stated it's predominantly modern human-like in morphology and third function of an adducted hallux. That means that the big toe is in line with the other toes, is not opposable like in apes. Okay. And elongated tarsals, the 7 bones that form the ankle joint, and derived ankle and calcaneocubic joints. In combination, these indicate a foot well adapted for striding bipedalism. However, the native foot differs from modern humans, having a more curved proximal pedal phalanges, that is the toes, and features suggestive of reduced medial longitudinal arch. So now the range of curve and the pedal proximal phalanges, the toe bones, appear to overlap, looking at the data, they actually overlap considerably with Homo sapien. So I don't think this finding is really that significant. It's interesting, well, I think I got it here. It's interesting that the toe bones of the LB1 Homo floresiensis are also said to be slightly curved. That is its proximal pedal phalanges, and that it had an absent or reduced medial longitude arch in its foot. So according to Young et al., the metatarsus has a human-like robusticity formula, but the proximal pedal phalanges are relatively long and robust and slightly curved. The hallux is fully adducted, that is in line with the other toes, so not opposed, basically not opposable like an ace. But we suspect that a medial longitudinal arch was absent. Okay, and as I already talked, Homo floresiensis possibly associated with cretinism. On the native foot, paleoanthropologist Dan Lehman is quoted saying, the foot is indeed strikingly modern and suggests it walked and possibly ran much like modern humans. And I was alluding to this study earlier by Lee et al. They had as a major goal to test the hypothesis that hominidae did not have a flat foot, as it is widely considered by prominent researchers. And from the study, the authors reported obtained results strongly suggest that hominidae does not have a flat foot. And the relative wide forefoot and narrow calves reveal that hominidae is skilled in running with forefoot striking the ground, a better pattern for barefoot running because the ankle will be less likely to sprain. Running with forefoot striking can benefit from proprioception as well as the shock absorption function of longitudinal foot arch. So basically, one of the striking features is that it's essentially a modern foot. And so, you know, so that's a very strong indication along with the skull that you're dealing with a human here, you know. Now, based on a tibia, the estimated stature of one hominid individual was estimated to be between 144.5 and 147.8. Hang on, the stature must have got that probably must be centimeters, not millimeters. Whereas body mass was estimated from 8 female specimens to vary from 39.7 kilograms to 55.8 kilograms. But then that doesn't include every specimen, all individuals, that's just certain specimens. So their estimates of both stature and body mass, they're comparative to a small bodied human, so they were generally small in size. Now, it's stated that locomotor traits shared with Homo include the absolutely long lower limb. So generally, humans have. When I say humans, I don't include the Homo habilis specimens. That they have actually absolutely longer lower limb, with male marking superior, strong M gluteus maximus assertions and graceful fibula, and generally human-like ankle and foot. These aspects of the lower limb suggest enhanced locomotive performance for a striding gait. And the National Geographic article by James Shue shows that in a compass skeleton illustrates hominidity with long legs. Okay, so let's look some of the other parts of the skeleton. So look at the pelvis. So in the Van Sickle et al. Examined the pelvis, publication a few years after the initial discovery, and I say the degree of lateral flare of hominin the ilium resembles that of Africanus. So there's list several Africanus specimens that are at least attributed to Africanus and afarensis. And she has note that the KSD, the Kanamu or big man skeleton, that's a skeleton attributed to afarensis, but there's no really elements that actually diagnostic elements because they're missing its hands, feet, and skull. A post-cranial skeleton without taxonomically diagnostic cranial dental material that has been attributed, for instance, may have had a more modern human-like orientation of the iliac ala, which is the larger expanded portion of the ilium. So that's what gets back to I don't know how much I covered it in the last time. I'm saying that's an afarensis specimen dated about 3.6 million years ago, allegedly, but it's very modern. It has a very much human-like. A lot of its features are very human-like, and it don't believe it belongs in afarensis at all. But I don't. Evolutionists can't call it that or erectus because that would catastrophically affect their timeline. Anyhow, one feature now, you can see the lateral iliac flare. You can see in B. If you see that, that's basically anterior view. So basically, it's kind of like the hip is here, so the ilia's flaring out there. And the one thing, I don't know if I have a, okay. So, but the one thing noted, it's very flat, and basically it flares out to the side. So it has so it resembles that of Africanus, at least superficial afarensis, in that specimen. You know, although like I said, that it's only one specimen, so I don't, not sure how many, you know, other specimens. I don't know that. I'm not quite sure how many. When I put it together, how many actual specimens, whether I give the same value or how many specimens I've actually got that they can give it, that they can actually quantify as flaring or whatever. So, but that's just one specimen. I think the next slide I'll talk more about it. But the other thing is, which I talked about last time, was the body or centrum of the sacrum, the first S1 body, the top of the sacrum. It's shown in C and D. D shows the top of it, and it says it has the small, in terms of the body, the area, it has the smallest yet recorded in the adult hominin fossil record, comparable to but smaller than that of the SGS14 africanus. Okay, and basically, and falling close to Siamangs, that is black-furred gibbons. Okay, so basically, and also, I don't know whether they were saying, but when we get to the vertebrate, there's some really small vertebrae. The spinal canals are more normal, but their bodies are very, very small. And this one is really small. And I mentioned then that with afarensis, which is large, which is a larger body, even evolutionists have doubts about whether it could support sort of the stress and strain of a continued upright posture and walking and stuff like that, with such a small cross-section area of body of the centrum. Now, this is even smaller still, and so if it's human, then it's strange. And the one thing that may explain it is cretinism can have severe dwarfism. So, so Lucy was 1.05 meters, and Lucius was larger. So this could represent a dwarfed individual. I mean, cretins can be under a meter in height. So that's a possible explanation. So that would be in line with the cretinous explanation why you have such a small vertebra. Okay. Now, like I said, I don't know how many actual vertebrate are and stuff like that. So they may, the ones in the Leslie chamber that they found some there are a bit more robust and things like that. But this is very small. So that could very well indicate the folio. I don't know how even a human is usually a modern human. What we see is much larger, as I showed an example of. So this is one indicator that we're possibly doing some sort of a very small individual. In fact, they acknowledge that with the vertebra, as I'll show later on. And so this could be indicating a some form of dwarf, not just a small individual, but this is abnormal, normally small. Okay, so basically the ilium, the flaring of the ilium is similar, said to be similar to inaferences, at least in this feature, and basically the flare of the ilium, and basically they note that the angle, I can measure the angle because the iliac fossa is flat instead of concave. So I mentioned, so if you look at the bottom there, they mention that they look at some other specimens which the flaring of that, and say that the Naledi Flimna ilia are more flared than Sediba, and specimen attributed to early Homo. So this is 3 KNMR 3228 OH28 KNM2 15,000. So basically, 15,000, that's the Tucana boy, okay? And so, and they say there's similar iliac flaring in later Homo specimens. That SH pelvis 1, that's Homo heidelbergensis, that's a human. LB17, that's the Homo floresiensis. Kabara 2, so that's a Neanderthal. So we've got these 3 as humans, so that has similar lateral iliac flaring as in Naledi. Well, I'm not sure the angle is the same, but it says whereas it remained flat in Naledi and the early Australopiths, that is, the former curvature is also present in modern humans. So basically saying that, sorry, the ilia is concave but flared in the specimen, the Heidelbergensis, Hobbit, and Kabara specimen, where is in Naledi and the early Australopithecus, it is flared but flat. Okay, now the former now the concave iliac fossa is also present in modern humans, and modern humans lack the flaring of these late Homo, what they call late Homo fossils. And they state, we suggest that Homo naledi had more primitive iliac anatomy but flared but flat than either early Homo, which was not very flared. So basically, some of the early Homo was less flared than some of the later ones. So it seems a bit contradictory. And later Homo flared but curved, or modern humans not flared. So it's a sort of bit of a dog's breakfast working this one out, because the one thing so flaring may not necessarily indicate pathology if you actually see it in Neanderthals and Homo heidelbergensis. I guess one of the indication is that it was flat. The iliac surface was flat, not curved. Okay, and just for the record, I don't know if I got it. The lateral flaring of ilium is present also in cretinism. Okay, now, and so basically, and the Homo floresiensis Hobbit specimen is described as having marked degree of lateral iliac flaring. Of course, that's seen in Australopithecines such as Lucy. So the people looked at the Hobbit compared its pelvis flaring to Lucy. I don't know if they looked at the curving and what the extent of curving is or not. But so that's the state of play with the pelvis. Okay, now the vertebra. I'll just have another sip. Now, in the initial Berger paper, the description of the vertebra was consistent of Homo naledi being human. They said that the preserved adult thoracic 10 and 11 vertebrae are proportionally similar to Pleistocene Homo, with transfer process morphology most similar to Neanderthals. The neural canals of these vertebrae are large in comparison to the diminutive overall size of the vertebrae, proportionally recalling Dionys erectus, Neanderthals, and modern humans. And then so they're basically saying they that the neural canals are large. In the later paper by Hawkes et al. Stated that on the Donati, on the findings in the Lesedi chamber, it states that the Donati chamber and Lesedi chamber, two fossil vertebrate pairs, Jurassic 10 and 11 vertebrate, were comparable in size, but the Lesedi vertebrate clearly belonged to a larger, more robust, presumed male individual. So again, there is a lot of variability in these things. Now, further analysis of the Donati chamber vertebrate roots was reported in 2017. So just the early ones. And so here they say here by Williams et al. And here we describe hominin vertebrate ribs and sternal veins from the Donati chamber. Attributed to Donati, and says although the ranges are highly fragmented, the best preserved specimens, two lower thoracic vertebrae and a lower rib, were found in association and belong to a small-bodied individual. A second lower rib may belong to this individual as well. So this is associated finds or fossils. All four of these individual elements are amongst the smallest known in the hominin fossil record. So basically, again, this sort of goes back to what I was saying about the small centrum or body of the first sacrum being the smallest in the fossil record. Here now they're saying this is the smallest known vertebra in the fossil record. So again, and it's they're calling it a small-bodied individual. So again, this suggests to me it could very be some sort of dwarfism, and which would be consistent with extreme forms of cretinism or something like that. As I say, hominoid is characterized by robust, relatively uncurved lower ribs and relatively large spinal canal. So they still have a relatively large spinal canal, but the vertebrae are very, the body are very small. Now, the initial Berger paper on the rib cage described the rib cage as wide distally like afferences, and elsewhere in the paper they stated, I'm trying to avoid reading all of it, the shape of the upper rib cage appears narrow as assessed from first and second rib fragment, suggesting that the thorax is pyramidal in shape. The 12th rib presents a robust shaft cross-section most similar to Neanderthals. This combination not found in other hominins that might reflect allometric scaling at a small trunk side. Now, in the team's follow-up paper on the vertebrae and ribs on Homo by Williams et al., so we speculate that apparent lack of rib torsion as hominins does suggest a wide lower thorax morphology, perhaps coupled with a cranial-caverned upper thorax that is dissimilar to that of modern humans and perhaps Neanderthals and other members of the junior Homo. I state the proximal upper rib ends in hominidity are too incomplete to allow reconstruction of the curvature. However, a strong cranially oriented glenoid and an elevated clavicle and shoulder are suggested of a narrow upper thorax. Now the Homo erectus narconon boy is described as having a barrel-shaped thorax. I can show you there. You can see there, that's a modern human there. I'll just go back to the slide. Now, the reconstructed rib cage of Afarensis, the lucid specimen is described as being shaped like a funnel with narrow part at the top and wide lower region. You can see it here on the left here. So it's more wider and narrow at the top. And you can see the Neanderthals, they kind of it was thought to be barrel shaped. Now it's sort of more wide distally, but maybe not as much as the as Afarensis. So as it's indicated that before 2001, the Neanderthal rib cage illustrated textbook looked like a barrel-shaped human model, but in 2001 they assembled an entire Neanderthal skeleton consisting of fossil areas from different sites, and both of a conical shaped thorax that tapered upward from the broad pelvis to a narrow top, giving it an incredibly distinctive look. Hence, a wide distal lower region rib cage can, apart from being interpreted to be like Afarensis, also perhaps be interpreted as being similar to that of Neanderthals. Now, let's have another sip. Now, simply suggesting that the thorax was pyramidal shape sounds unconvincing, but what if it does turn out to be pyramidal shape, as suggested? Apart from resembling an Australopithecine and possibly Neanderthal, what other explanation is possible? Now, a paper by Ortner and Hort showed a photo illustrating a case of hypothyroidism and creatinism in the thorax part of the skeleton of an 80-year-old modern human male. In the caption, it says, no triangular shape of thorax, indicating greatly diminished development of costa of cranial end of thorax relative to lower costa. Now, I don't have a photo. I don't have that picture show. Now, I don't know if you can see. Can you see this paper at all? Donny, you there?
Yes, let me.
Can you see that? Now,
yes,
if you go to,
now we can.
Skeletal manifestation of hypothyroidism from Switzerland, American Journal of Physical Anthropology, 2005, volume 127.3. Now, if you go to page 5, so if you have access to this paper, go to page 5. I don't know if can you see on top here?
Yes, I put you full screen so we can see it good.
That's what I'm talking about. The pyramidal shape. That's a human cretinism, and you can see that the shape of the rib cage or thorax, how it's
Right.
it's more Lucy-like than Lucy. Okay, it's triangular shaped. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. And in fact, the Orton and odds show that they examined 12 cases of skeletal growth disturbance in hypothyroidism. So in the 12 cases, 8 cases had disproportionate development of the rib cage. So you don't get this, in fact, in all people cretinism, but in a high proportion. And the author stated disproportionate development of costa typically more severe in the cranial end of the thorax. So basically, a pyramidal or triangular thorax in hominoid, it could be evidence that one is dealing with a developmental pathology such as cretinism. Okay. And that I'll talk later about the shoulder. That could have if there's a development link, that could have a knockout effect to what happens at the shoulder as well. We'll talk about that more later. Okay, so looking at the hand, so there's a paper on the hand by Kibble et al. And they state that the wrist and palm are generally most similar to those of Neanderthals and modern humans, while the fingers are more curved than some Australopiths. This distinctive mosaic of morphology has yet to be observed in any other hominin taxon, and suggests that the use of the hand for arboreal locomotion in combination with forceful precision manipulation typically used during tool-related behaviours. So at face value, the fingers of hominid appears better suited to climbing than chimpanzees, as the proximal phalanges are about the same curvature. But hominid's intermediate phalanges are considerably more curved than those of chimpanzees and Australopithecines. The median value is even higher than orangutans. According to the authors, extant apes and most fossils, hominids such as Afrensis and OH7, generally have more strongly curved proximal phalanges and comparably straight intermediate phalanges. Here, and on the right there, it shows hand one, a palmar view on the left and dorsal view on the right of the hand, discovered in articulation. So, and it's a proportion of the digits are human-like. All right. Yet other aspects of hominid's hand, the thumb, wrist, and palm bones, all look remarkably modern, according to James Shreve in National Geographic. Hence, most of the hominid hand is human-like, except for the markedly curved fingers, stated as a clear functional indication that fingers experience high loads during grasping required for climbing or suspensory locomotion. Now, studies do show that the curvature in the finger bones are generally the result of mechanical strain put on them. Okay, so the more you, so that's generally true. So the phalangeal curve is one of the best indicated function in the hand. The degree, according to authors of the hand, the degree of longitude curve is strongly correlated with the degree of arboreal locomotion across primates. So climbing, especially suspensory taxa, showing much stronger curvature than terrestrial, quadrupedal, or bipedal taxa. It's interesting that regarding homofluorescence is that its proximal phalanx is curved similar degree as an afarensis. So basically, Kibble is stating that. So that was not the LB1 individual. The fluorescensis bone referred to actually belonged to the LB6 individuals. And the author of that study say the LB6-8 falls at the extreme upper end of the human range and overlaps the gorillas. It is similar in this respect to an Australopithecus afarensis specimen. So the proximal manual phalanges of the Homo floresiensis of the LB1 specimen, the phalanges are appear too incomplete to make conclusive judgment of curvature. So no information appears to be given on the curvature of intermediate manual phalanges of LB1 and LB6 Homo floresiensis individuals. And so, and as I've said, they've been argued to be cretins, and they have curvature, at least proximal phalangeal curvature evident, at least in one of the individuals. So there's a pattern there. So hence, did Homo suffer from cretinism in a similar way to individuals from Homo floresiensis species possibly did, with the curved fingers related to cretinous or associated conditions? Now, this is where, I don't know that cretinism explains this, but any bone pathology that weakens the bone would make you more susceptible to mechanical strain that you don't have to climb. So example is, essentially Mozart's fingers were extremely curved. So I'm kind of quoting here from a book, The Bleeding of Mozart. Mozart's fingers were extremely curved, and that this is possible due to bone deformity suggestive of old heel rickets, as apparently the lack of light and dietary condition of his infancy left little doubt that Mozart must have suffered from rickets, or at least from vitamin D deficiency. So the thing is, I don't know whether cretinism caused the weakness of the bones means it's more easier to the bones just bend easier because they're weaker. But certainly, if they have rickets or vitamin D deficiencies, they do, and that's also a weakness of the bones. And so, whether you have now a different, so now I don't know the conditions of the Naledi sample. How much time did I spend in the caves? Particularly the young, where was that like initially it was thought they only buried the dead, but it seems like all the fires and stuff they may have spent a considerable time in there. Whether that was a refuge to save patient safety, I don't know. So how much sunlight were they exposed to? What was their diet? Was it vitamin D deficiency? So these are questions that sort of is hard to answer at present. However, the Letty's hand, it doesn't make sense in an evolutionary scenario. If it was transitional between Australopithecines and the latest species Homo, as indicated by finger curvature, why would it spend as much time swinging in trees as its hypothetical Australopithecine ancestor, as indicated by its proximal phalanges? Or actually, why would it be swinging trees much more than its ancestor, even more so than chimps, and perhaps as much as orangutans, if you consider only the intermediate phalanges, when it should be less so? It had human legs, feet, so it wasn't really adapted for climbing trees. Certainly not its lower body, and there's no way it would have been as good as the chimpanzees or orangutans. It wouldn't have been, that would not have been. So I just don't see how it could possibly, that the curvature could be that it spent so much time in the trees that particularly its intermediate phalanges were so curved, more than so than orangutans. Although it should point out the variation curve is quite considerable now, and particularly the curvature on the intermediate phalanges. So there's a lot of variation there as well. So this is one of the areas, but I just don't fit. It doesn't fit any evolutionary scenario, and it just doesn't fit it. But that is one of the things to further look at. What can explain this curvature? Now this is an interesting thing. Looking at the humeral torsion, And so it's the angle by which the orientation of the elbow axis deviates from that of the head of the upper arm bone. So it's defined as the torsion. So basically, torsion of the head of the humerus is defined as the angle made by the axis of the head of the humerus here with the axis of the kind of elbow joint here. Now, among the primates, humans show the greatest degree of torsion, followed by the African apes, the orangutans, the gibbons, the semi-brachiating New World monkeys, and then by the Old World monkeys. Now, the high degree of human torsion has generally been considered as a feature shared by humans and apes as the result of a common ancestral adaptation to either brachiation or fallen assisted climbing. Elliot Larson has pointed out the most specialized brachiator, the gibbon, has a small degree of torsion in comparison to humans and the larger apes. Larson also suggested that the high degree in human torsion in humans and the African apes is most probably not a shared feature inherited from a common ancestor, but a feature that has been achieved in parallel in response to different selection pressures. So here's sort of parallel evolution. You need now you need two miracles. You need the information in the genome to be for this humoral torsion to be imparted separately to explain something. The same author also argued that the equally high degree of human torsion in humans is a response not to locomotion but to manipulation. This just shows proximal humeral fragments from the Lesedi chamber, the LES1 skeleton. Langdon notes that in addition, the elbows are rotated so the flexion occurs in the parasagittal plane in humans. So you're kind of like this, sagittal plane is that way, and here. So this human torsion occurs in the shaft of the humerus between the shoulder joint and the elbow, so that it can be measured by the relative facing of two joints. Human torsion is low in all the fossils discussed so far. Human torsion is high in chimpanzees and gorillas, and presumably was independently derived to support the movement of the elbow and knuckle walking. So they're suggesting gorillas and chimps evolved separately because they evolved knuckle walking. The fact that early hominids showed this primitive condition is an argument against their ancestors having passed through a knuckle walking phase. So this argues against that the ancestor human was not a knuckle walker. So the chimps and gorillas must have evolved knuckle walking independently. Now, this is, I think I've got to just look at some, I just got some of the human torsion values here. So you can see the humans sort of have 144, immature 137. So if it's immature, so it's a juvenile or subadult, or usually the torsion will increase by a few more degrees. Now you notice that Hominin has there's three values given, 2 adult, 1 immature. Notice one has 91 degree. Now that's outside any basically any fossil. Basically, you can see there it's outside gibbons. Gibbons are supposed to be sort of show the common conditions. See the hylobates there. It has 116.6. Hominin has 91. And the apes, why the apes and chimps, they're sort of in the more the human range. The gorillas are probably even higher than humans. The orangutans, 135. So basically, now the Australopithecines, they are sort of 120s, 117 for Sediba, Afarensis 124. I know as Erectus, the Tucanabar is immature, so 111.5, so that could likely increase a bit. And the Damenese Erectus D4167 adult 110, so that's a bit low. Whether that indicates something, a problem in that group as well. There's one as a 104 that would have increased a bit as well. So I say that the Hominin one, from the Lesedi chamber, its torsion seems, well, will certainly be normal with respect to the other Homo erectus specimen, but the Hominin one, even the immature one, seems a bit low, would have grown a bit larger, but certainly there's one specimen there that is really out of whack, 91. And to put that in perspective, a paper by Eckhart et al. Commented on the low initial estimate of human torsion in the Homo floresiensis specimen which had subsequently been revised to a higher value of 115, 120 degrees, which made it within the range of extant small body humans. Okay, so as stated, Floresiensis, a member of the genus Homo, I'm not going to read it all, should have humeral torsions within the hominid, larger apes plus humans range, where we're at a healthy, normal individual. So its reported value is more likely to be diagnostic of pathology than uniqueness. So basically, numerous studies, some cited by reference by Cargill, document development and influence on human torsion as a result of various pathologies, occupation, and sports, particularly those involving throwing. Now, it should be noted that that this initial Hobbit torsion value of 110 degrees appears to have been first published in 2005, which was before the publication of the Dominisi Erectus torsion values in 2007. And so at the time, a humeral torsion of 110 appeared to have been the lowest for any hominin, supposed hominin. The interesting question now is, if some evolutionists consider a low humeral torsion value of 110 degrees to be more likely to be diagnostic of pathology than uniqueness, what does it say about the much lower hominid humeral torsion value of 91 degrees? According to Obendorf et al. In their paper, humeral torsion is reduced by an average of 20 degrees in smaller Swiss adult endemic cretins. So this would be consistent with cretinism, okay? So, so people say, where's the evidence of pathology? Well, you have to know where to look. You have to compare samples. It doesn't always come gift wrapped with a label on it saying this is pathological. You have to do a bit of a comparison and look at the bones and stuff, but compare them to other fossils, compare them to other humans, okay? So this indicates that something is not quite right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So now let's look at the ventral, the shoulder angle of the shoulder. So that indicates the ventral bar glenoid angle indicates your orientation of the glenoid cavity, which is a lower angle indicating that the glenoid is oriented more cranially. For example, in afarensis, its low ape-like ventral bar glenoid indicates that the arm was habitually used in an elevated position that would be common during climbing behavior. In a follow-up paper by on the shoulder by Fugedal on a hominoid shoulder, that hominoid had a scapula of a markedly cranially oriented glenoid, being as cranially oriented as gibbons and more cranial than the great apes, chimps, orangutans, and gorillas. Modern humans, Stralopithecus and Afarensis, Africanus, Sediba, and Homo erectus. The authors concluded that hominoid has scapula of a marked cranially oriented glenoid, a humerus of extremely low torsion, and a Stralopithecus-like clavicle. These traits indicate that the Naledi scapula was situated superior and laterally on the thorax. This shoulder girder configuration is more similar to Stralopithecus, as distinct from that of modern humans, with scapula positioned low and dorsally about the thorax. Okay, so this shows the ventral bar glenoid angle here, sort of indicated there. So that's the angle we're looking at, and so you can see here that the larger the angle, the less cranial oriented the shoulder joint is. So here's Homo sapiens here. So you can see here Homo naledi 121.1. So that's the same as Gibbons, and you have a various range here. Again, the Catamus skeleton, the one that same as Afarensis, has 134. So that's certainly within the human erectus, erectus range. Is much higher than the other Afarensis. Sorry, well, it's not much higher. It's 134. The Afarensis lucy is actually 132, and Africanus is 128, 124. So you can see here there's somewhere actually the variation isn't that great, but certainly the Takana boy is 137. But note the low value of Homo naledi. So again, how does this? It's not Homo naledi would not be a sufficient. It's not an Australopithecine. It's not as efficient. Wouldn't be as efficient as climbers as Australopithecines, or as a chimp, or as a as an orangutan, why would it have a cranial orientated glenoid much lower? So that's one of the items of interest. So basically, so they Archanids retained its primitive morphology, conducted the climbing. Now, I argue Hominin could not have been a transition form between the Australopithecines and later species of Homo, as its shoulder was even more cranially orientated than its hypothetical Australopithecine ancestor. So it can't be a transitional form if it's more supposedly primitive. In Williamson, and when I discussed the vertebrate, I note that the proximal upper rib ends in the Naledi are too incomplete to allow reconstruction of the curvature. However, a strong cranial-oriented glenoid and an elevated clavicle and shoulder are suggesting of a narrow upper thorax. This morphology contrasts with evidence for long lower limbs and striding bipedalism and other derived features of the hand and skull. So now, despite it, the wide lower limb morphology, elevated shoulder and wide lower thorax of Hominin suggests to us that this species was not adapted to efficient long-distance running, suggested as a key trait of Homo erectus, while arboreal activities may be important aspects of the behavioral repertoire of Homo naledi. So they're going for it, so this arboreal and that. However, if a stated by Williams that a strong cranial-oriented glenoid and an elevated clavicle and shoulder are suggestive of a narrow upper thorax, this may suggest some sort of development linkage between shoulder girdle position and width of the upper thorax. And so someone had a narrow upper thorax due to cretinism, discussed earlier regarding rib cage, and I showed that here. And basically, in the picture, it certainly seems like the shoulders are quite high. And so someone had a narrow upper thorax due to cretinism, would that then suggest the person would likely have a cranial-oriented glenoid and elevated superior shoulder? Perhaps, but then it would have nothing to do with evolution, but rather a developmental pathology. So if there is a developmental linkage between a shoulder girdle and upper thorax, then a narrow upper thorax, a feature observed in some people of cretinism, not all, could potentially explain the shoulder joint being tipped towards the head. All right. So that finishes that part. Now I've probably gone quite a bit, so this other part might take a bit too. So I don't know whether to maybe that's something. The evidence of fire and all that. Maybe that's something that can be taken up next time. I don't know if there's any more question or something, Donny. So maybe that's a lot for now, and maybe we can take that up again some time in the future. The bit about the more recent finding of the Naledi study and things like that.
Yes, I think that might be a good idea, especially because that brings us into a lot of the more recent data and information on Naledi with the controversy going on in terms of the rising cave system. And so why don't we get into some questions? And since we're at the 2.5 hour mark, firstly, I want to say that was incredibly comprehensive, Peter. I love it. That's what I like when it comes to these topics. It was technical and probably one of the most thorough presentations and lectures I've seen on the topic. And so that's great. I think this is important. This is exactly what we need.
Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, there's so much there and I could ask you dozens of questions. So I'll just point out, I took a picture of one of the papers you showed maybe about 20 minutes ago. So I'm pulling it up here. And again, it supports what Oxnard was saying earlier. And the quote,
is that the one about the rib cage?
Let me see here.
I don't know. I can exit. I can go back and.
It was the one specifically where it said the primitive features of Homo naledi, rather than explained by evolutionary reversals, are more plausibly explained by.
I'm on the different page now. Yep.
Yeah, and it says explained by pathology or pathologies, perhaps involving cretinism. And so
Yeah.
another thing I appreciate about your presentation is you're backing up everything you're saying. Your hypothesis is supported. Your working hypothesis is supporting by the conventional literature, citation after citation. And I think that's incredible. So I guess my question would be, you've seen some critics say, well, how can Naledi, the group, how could they be pathological or diseased, since you'd expect variation within that disease? As in, it seems like there's uniformity within the Naledi group, where they've all got these features: the small brain size, the small body size, the curved fingers, so on and so forth. And so what would be a good response to that criticism?
Well, I think, there is, as you can see, that like with the human torsion, there's actually quite a lot of, there was variation in the three specimens presented. One was 91, one was 123. So 123 with normal, 191 is clearly out of range of pretty much everything, and one was 104 is immature, so probably would have grown by a few degrees. Even some of the phalangeal curvature, if you look at the data, it's a long, they're not all high. Some are lower than others. Some are just within or just outside the human range, depending on what you look at. So there is a lot of variation. There is a lot of variation there, and you have to bear in mind that with cretinism, the population, it's only between 1 to 10% of the population has it, and it can take a lot of different effects in different individuals. So you may not see the same effect in all individuals. So you can have most of the population relatively normal, but you may have, I'm thinking about, but there may be, I think, like even Oxenarger in the book with the Hobbit, they like in Homo floresiensis, they may have grouped together in a cave because they may have been ostracized or whatever. They sheltered in the cave together for their own good, and there may be similar thing in the cave system there. There may not be. There may have been a lot of relatively normal, although I don't believe they were normal modern humans. I believe they're more erectus type humans, but they may have sheltered in the cave together. They may have spent more time in the cave because of their conditions. So yeah, it's a one area to look at. I don't think anyone has got 100% grasp on the situation. I think more data needs to come out. But to sort of someone to say, oh, they're all the same. Well, that's not. I've demonstrated that human torsion is not all the same, and they should look at some of the go and look at some of the measurements of the data to see that there's like in any sample of skeleton, there's going to be variation, and there is, and even the cranial capacities that varies. So the large one is 610. I suppose a small composite one is 465 or something. So even there's variation, but you got to. But we don't know the rest of them. If there was more than 15 individuals, so we don't in the chamber. We only know reports of several two composite crania. We don't know what were the measurements of the cranial capacity of all the others. So yeah. So I see that there's some they certainly belong to the same but same species. No one. A few people would argue that the Dmanisi crania, the 5 crania, are different species. They're all the same, but there's clearly differences. One has obvious pathology, the one with the tooth loss, but even skull 5. I mean, it's so strange that probably that it has the sort of same form on its brain case as the other, but the face and stuff, and the mandible indicates that could well be have something, a similar effect, but we just so that so yeah.
Well, your presentation was so thorough and technical, Peter, that you essentially countered most of the objections that have come in from the critics directly in your presentation. Like, that's how thorough it was. And so I really want to encourage critics and evolutionists to look it over objectively. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, look, I think it's good people think about it, and I don't pretend to have all the answers. And look, if someone can think of a more plausible explanation, then that's well and good. But you got to start somewhere. So there's a working hypothesis, and and things like that. And I think there's a lot to know to come out of there that we in the future. So it'll be very interesting
Well,
to see.
I like what you say in your article on creation.com, puzzling Homo naledi, and you talked about it here. You just mentioned it, that these individuals, these Homo naledi individuals, being different, diseased, having cretinism, they could have been ostracized from their greater community because of that disease.
Yeah,
and maybe this was a superstitious community that thought they were cursed in some way, and so now they were isolated, possibly in this cave, sheltered there.
Yeah, or part of the cave. We just it's just hard to know. We don't even know who was like the burial thing. It seems like the ones that buried seem to be the same form as the others, but we don't even know who was buried. Was it only certain people buried there? Were only pathology buried, or was it normals buried? We just don't know. And
well, I think you bring forth a lot of interesting hypotheses to ponder, because you've even pointed out that maybe what we're looking at could be some form of euthanasia, that they're basically abandoned in the cave because of their deformities. And that makes sense.
Thing is, the thing is, if you were living that state, say there's all sorts of predators around, and if it, where would you probably live? You probably, if I was in that situation, that sort of cave system would probably be a safe place to spend the night.
Right? Yeah.
You wouldn't spend in the tree, because you could be eaten by a leopard or something. And the thing is, their feet was very human and stuff, so they weren't that adapted to. So you can't say that they were really, they weren't orangutans or chimps, the climate behavior. That's why I think that there's certainly something pathological, and the human torture values indicate there's something really, really strange in some of them, but also that, like I said, the small vertebrae and the small body of the sacrum indicate, at least in one, that must have been, if it was human, it had to be dwarfed, because that's so small, but it had a relatively large spinal canal, which means it was sort of that was more relatively normal, but the very small body, which means it wasn't so it wasn't this, unless it was some dwarfed. If it was a normal stature human, it just wouldn't be able to cope. It'd be have a chronic problems, but back pain, because of all the pressure brought on such a small space on the sacrum's body, and the small vertebrae in that region. So I think that I don't think they're all pathological. I think there's some are pathological, but they could have, more of them could have sheltered in the cave than perhaps the percentage-wise in the population, because that was a refuge, and they were less capable than other humans. But I believe there was other relatively normal erectus type specimens mixed up in there, and the thing is, you're dealing with a commingled sample, where if you have normal and abnormal mixed up, and we don't know the percentage, and we don't know what other conflated conditions there are. Like I said,
we might not have examples of other individuals in the greater community if this is just a sub group of the greater group.
Yeah, and we know that Homo erectus was in the area, because I just showed it, and I don't accept the dating methods. That, in fact, that dating in that area is all over the place. Anyhow, they change it all the time, and so this is so basically we know that Homo erectus was in the area, and so I think it was a Homo erectus population, but some of them were pathological, and And,
do you think?
I think it's very interesting, and I think there's a lot of there's probably a lot more questions than answers at this point. But
is it possible that one of the many reasons why we see degeneration as being a prominent feature of the hominin fossil record, with Floresiensis, with Naledi specifically? I mean, we could get into Luzonensis as another one, because after the flood, the post-flood rocks could have been higher in like uranium, for example, or other harsh elements that would affect the drinking water, the rocks at these. Go ahead.
I guess look, yeah, I mean that could be possibly too. My thing, look, it's well possible, and you don't. I guess you got to take every situation individually and look and my thing for cretinism is that my thing against the genetics is that you have the same waiting time problem that evolutionists have to to make the new features. It'll take forever and a day. It can never happen. And so to suggest the same features to explain a population, that all these mutations that occur in a population would take time and move through. So cretinism don't need that, and natural selection doesn't get rid of it, because as long as it's in the environment. But if you had a high dose of radiation, sure, but then the people getting that would the mutations would probably be different in different people, and if it was really high, then probably they wouldn't survive very long,
And what you're saying with pathology and disease, it can manifest rapidly. There is no waiting time issue.
There is no waiting time, except for if the mother is iodine deficient and doesn't, and that sort of when she's in the period of prenatal development. Then that's the really vulnerable period there, and that's where it's such a preventable thing, and it has such a lot of history, and as you can show on the maps, it's occurred all over the world, and because people didn't know about it, and so there's a lot of unnecessary suffering, and it's prevalent, and if we didn't know about it until recently, then how much hundreds or years ago or thousands of years ago, what would be the case? But look, there's a lot of them, and I said there could be other explanations to your high radiation, mate. They could explain isolated cases and things like that. But if it's too high,
it could be many factors really that are.
You can get commingling of pathologies and other factors. So it's just
So I'd like to ask you, based on I find it amazing the images that you showed, specifically the hands and the phalanges. I don't know how anybody could look at Naledi's hands and conclude that they're anything other than human. Clearly human hands, clearly human feet, and the phalanges, the curved phalanges. Is that also possibly due to the cretinism, low vitamin D, low iodine in the soil?
Well, it certainly can be caused by vitamin D. As I gave example of the Mozart, but he wasn't out climbing trees, so it could be. So it could be due to vitamin D deficiency. That's what it could be a conflated disease, but I don't know how it has on cretinism now. So if these people were climbing in the caves, and the Naledi is a difficult system to navigate, it could even be explained by that. If you're not getting much sunlight or a poor diet, or both, then it could explain, particularly if you're young at that age, and it could explain some of the curvature. I don't think they could have possibly with the human feet and legs, they couldn't be that mobile in the trees that to develop, particularly the intermediate phalanges, to be more the median value more greater than orangutans. That just doesn't seem plausible to me. And then you have all these other effects of the humeral torsion, which is much lower than the gibbon, which is supposed to be the ancestral condition. So there's all these weird things, and then it just doesn't match. There's a lot of things, and even the evolutionist Bernard Wood suggesting they were modern but evolved to be more primitive.
Right.
So that's another thing.
If already they're deficient in vitamin D, they're already suffering from cretinism, and they're having to climb through this sophisticated cave system. That makes sense, just due to mechanical stress. We know that can happen today.
That's what the curvature is not. It's not generally believed to be genetics. It's believed to be the strain. So that's what I say. Juvenile apes have more curvature than adult apes generally if they climb more. And so basically it's the strain that's put on. So if they're doing some strenuous activity, I mean, even if I guess if you know, it, even if you say you walk around all day holding a rock tool all day, that would mean grasping your hand. That would put mechanical strain on your hand too. So, and if their bones are weak, that could cause the same sort of effect. I mean, that's just my speculation, but
No, I
there's a
think
lot of things.
Well, I think
Yeah,
that's good because phalanges, our fingers, are very versatile. They can adapt to a number of different
yeah,
functions and
yeah.
activities. So I guess my
And
question would be, I've heard people say that in order to determine using anatomy and morphology what is human versus what is ape, we should look at fingers, pelvis. But if we see in deformed humans curved phalanges,
yeah,
a flaring pelvis, are
yeah.
these good traits, therefore, to determine what is and what isn't human? Because clearly we
Probably
have some
not.
humans with those traits,
No,
right?
no, because it's not because even in the what we would regard as humans, like the Neanderthal and Heidelbergensis, if they have sort of flared ilia, although the concave surface of the ilia, but it's also a bit flared laterally,
Right.
then obviously we believe they're human. So that would not be a good indicator. I think that I mean not I wouldn't say 100%, but I think having a human foot, a modern human foot, I've never seen anything that has any fossil anything that has a modern human foot. So so that to me is not
Right.
100% criteria, but that I think you got to take the package and look. So if it has a modern human foot, that's a strong indicator. And then you usually that won't be due to pathology. So if it has a modern human foot, you're not going to get a modern human foot by pathology. You could get curvature by pathology and strange effects, but that's an indicator there. Enough, and we don't know anything else that has a modern human foot. So
Right.
that certainly is one indicator, and then you can look at the I guess the lower limb length, although that can be affected by pathology as well, like the Hobbit, the shorter limb lengths because of cretinism. So there's sort of so so so. Uh, you look at the features of the skull and things like that. Usually you have a parabolic dental arcade in humans. Um,
Well, with the
and
picture that you showed of Naledi's hand, you can clearly tell that it's human because you have the very long thumb in proportion to shorter fingers, which is unique
yeah,
to
yeah,
humans.
yeah.
And that gives us
That's
our ability to do the
that's
pad to pad.
that's also an indicator. Yeah, yeah. The hand. I think that you get a few of these things in one confer one helps solidify the other. So you take a few
Right.
of these whereas and that's why it took me a long time. I spent a fair bit of time when the cut remains come out. Uh, some people really almost overnight determined what is. I spent about 2 months looking at it because it wasn't. Some people may jump the gun and think, oh, this is just an ape, you know. But yeah, but when you look at it, you look at this has a human foot. You're thinking, well, gee, you got to be careful about calling it an ape if it has a human foot, and so just look at them more carefully, and then you look at what can explain some of these other supposed primitive features, and think, well, maybe pathology can, and then it has these oddities that sort of are not transitional between Australopithecine and erectus or whatever or human, and they're outside the range. And now with the date, it's become a sort of a curiosity because it
Right.
doesn't fit the date either. And who knows whether it turns out to be actually younger, but because the radiocarbon dates were very young, even for in an evolution timeline, and even some of the stuff dated in interesting things they date the charcoal in the chamber, which is supposed to be really young. So we can see. So it's yeah.
So,
We,
in light
we,
of what you just said, it sounds like when it comes to determining, I'm going to put a question up on screen, Peter, if you want to come back to the StreamYard to see it. In light
yeah,
of what you've been saying and what we've been discussing here, it sounds like we need to take a holistic approach to answering this question here. This comes in from Gutsick Gibbon. Here's the question
yeah.
on screen. What are the physical criteria for designating a human and an ape?
Yeah. Well, it says which she would call a human ape. So I don't know what she would call a human ape because I don't want to put words in her mouth. So I just look at, I don't like I said I don't. I think you've got to be smart about this. You've got to look at, like I said, a holistic whole package. You take all information that's available, and I mean today it's obviously you don't. We can just look at somebody, we know they're human or not, or they're ape. So it's more it's more if you look. I suppose it's the fossils maybe that she's getting at,
Right.
and
Yes.
I regard properly identified Homo erectus as being human because they're associated with tools, and they generally, and you can actually link them to ancestors of certain humans, and so basically, here, and I can talk more about that later if I get, and some other talk about Homo erectus, and
Actually,
so
Peter, I just wanted to say, take your time with this question. I just have to step away from the computer for 30 seconds.
okay, yeah, yeah, so I think Homo erectus, uh, which includes which or if you want to broadly define Homo erectus, Sensolatu, Heidelbergensis, Neanderthals, they're all human, robust humans. So that's what I regard as basically human. I don't regard Homo habilis as human. I regard as a wastebasket species. Most of them, even some evolutionists, believe they shouldn't be in Homo. They should be either assigned to their own genus or in the Australopithecines, and that's my feature too. Although some of them, like the cranium, was it SK847 or whatever from South Africa, is like your Homo erectus, which sometimes is put in habilis. I believe that should be in erectus. So there's some things that are mixed up, and some bones that are classified erectus or habilis, which are likely erectus, but they have no diagnostic cranial elements, so you can't prove it one way or the other. And I think when you says ape, well, it's pretty easy to look at what differences, but extant apes and humans today. So, yeah, okay, yeah, bottom there, yeah, yeah. So I think if you want to, but you're probably talking about a fossil record, and I don't actually uh, look at the Australopithecines as apes. So to me, they're extinct average primates. So
Right.
there are, and that's in line with Oxnard's analysis that showed they are actually a distinct group. They're not really closer than humans, but they're a distinct group, separate from apes and humans. And so it's like a triangle, all separate from each other. So uh, some have been some specimens say in Homo habilis, like the 1470 man, had been tricky, and but because they were basically its face was made to be more vertical than it was allowed for, and it should have been. So it's made to be more human, and which increases cranial capacity. And so we thought maybe that is a human. And later it turns out when they reanalyze it with more prognostic face, it's as indicated by the late Alan Walker, who believed it was just a large grain of Australopithecine, and even its brain shrinks when you might put the face on more correctly. So I don't. You can't really off the cuff go through a whole host of features that differentiate one from the other because bones can be very flexible, amendable. So,
Right.
but that's just so I don't want to sort of do that
But
off
when
the
you take
cuff.
the holistic approach, like you've done with Naledi, for example, you've looked at the hands, you've shown how, based on the way the foot bones are connected and the way the hallux, right, your big toe is aligned with the other toes.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
that tells us clearly, Naledi, we're looking at a human. We've got evidence in the feet, evidence in the hands,
yeah, yeah,
evidence. So we're taking a sophisticated approach. It's not just a one size fits
definitely.
all.
That's the best approach, and but the problem is a lot of the specimens there's only fragments, and you don't really get such a big sample. And although the Naledi, it's most perplexing sample around, so
Right.
sometimes it doesn't help.
It's the most controversial one right now, and I think you
Yep.
did.
I think it's some things that are definitely humans that aren't caused by pathology, like a human foot, and that hasn't been seen in other species, fossil or otherwise. That would be that to me. That's a sort of clear indication that you're dealing with likely human. And if you can find other things like human hands, then that adds to the probability that it's human. And then you look at the
Right.
skull, and so you go through it, and then you look at, is there any behavioral indication? So
Right.
when the early finds came out, there was none. But now we're coming out, but we haven't. Maybe that next time we look at that. But if all these things, burials, even the stone, this object was close to the hand, which it was found buried in, the fires and the engravings of that, if they were attributed to nullity, then only a human could have done all those things. So
Right.
there's a lot of controversy. It's very interesting. I think it's a lot of. I think he's ruffled a few feathers because because you see that this doesn't the finds that Naledi could do these things goes against the idea that only larger brained humans were capable of this, and so that's why there's a lot of big reaction to it.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter. Even the endocast scans of the skull have revealed a human brain organization or configuration with Naledi.
Yeah, it may well be. Yeah, I think I've read something about that, and it was a while ago, so I don't want to comment too much on it. I'm always a little bit wary about endocast because from studying a brain, and I know particularly in the frontal region, there's a lot of variability, and the endocasts don't capture
everything.
Everything in it. And the thing is, like if you look at language, you can, like some experiments done where they stimulate people have brain operations and for various reasons, and they do some tests while they're there. They stimulate parts of the cortex to find what inhibits language or causal language, and I find it's all over the place. So it's not just as typical areas, and the Broca's, which is more speech and stuff, or Wernicke's area, sort of more in the posterior temporal lobe region or something like that. It's a lot of places, and so to infer too much from a few humps and bumps is, I don't whether it's for or against my position, I try not to read too much. It's interesting, but I don't try to read too much into it because I know
it's a lot to. It's a 4-dimensional issue.
Yeah, and you don't want to. It's not a. I don't want to die on that hill, so to speak. So
no, I completely.
I don't want to fight that battle on that hill. That's not where, yeah.
I completely understand. So I've got a question up here from the audience, Doki Doki Bible Club. I appreciate it. And he's asking, are these patterns of pathology and disease that we've been discussing for about 3 hours here more consistent with the creation or evolution model, Peter?
I think I'm not 100% sure what you mean, but we're consistent with it. But I think usually evolutionists don't sort of try to avoid. Well, they publish studies where they find disease of things, but they don't talk about it too much. They don't look for it because if you have a pathological fossil specimen, it's not as attractive as having a new species or something like that.
Right.
So I don't think and stuff like that. But I think if it depends on the pathology, like the earlier you get to the flood and things like that, you'd expect the genome to be actually less mutations in the genome,
right.
because
Less
it's further
mutation
from the creation
saturation.
event. So that's another reason why, I think environmental effects and look, increased radiation from the flood and stuff could be an effect that that influences, which speeds up mutations, but it would probably speed up mutations in different places for each individual, unless they have offspring which passes that mutation on. but then you have and stuff like that. But usually, if it's just a random, if it's radiation, then the mutations it creates in the reproductive cells would be random. So it's not going to be, you're not going to see the same disorder in similar people, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
So but environmental things and creationism wouldn't be the only thing. There's a lot of, I guess there's other things that can prevent, like even is it high fluorine in the water? If you have a high fluorine, that can sort of inhibit uh, um, uh, the absorption of iodine in the body or something.
Right.
There's
Certain
sort of
vitamins.
things like that not that can affect. So I don't know whether. Um,
Well, I would
but I
explain
think
it like this too, because Peter, I think your presentation, your arguments are excellent in debunking or countering the evolution position, because they hold up these bones
yeah,
and they argue that these are basal or primitive or pre-human, but you're showing that no, those bones you're holding up that are anomalous, that are interesting, they're not evidence of anything transitional. They're evidence of pathology, evidence of disease, which gives them that deformed morphology. So rather
yeah.
than a process of evolution, it's a process of devolution in many ways.
Yeah, well, it's just an environmental effect. So if the next generation gets the supplement, so then it would
Right,
be
they can
back to
recover
normal.
from it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but
Right, that
but
but they can reverse the negative
once it's
effect.
happened, it's hard to that if the baby is born, then if it's given thyroxine, um, if it's given thyroxine supplements early, then a lot of it, I suppose, could be corrected for. But if you wait for a while, then it's going to be very hard to you can help you can help, but once it becomes an adult, of course, you can't correct it or a certain stage of it. But I don't know. It's the effect isn't in the genome, so it could vary. I don't know how that would, so theoretically they could have normal children, I suppose, if they weren't subject to iodine deficiency and stuff like that.
Right.
But the problem is if it's the mother and she doesn't have a functioning thyroid, then that well, she probably can't give birth to normal, because if you'd have to give the children the fetal basically supplement that with thyroid, or give the mother thyroid, which passes on to the fetus at some stage. But so it is very complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, I appreciate that answer. Next question here comes in from Slam RN. Now, I'm assuming our next show together, so part 3, will probably focus more on Arachnus, Neanderthal, and possibly what this question is pertaining to, Heidelbergensis. And so the questioner is asking what your thoughts are overall on Homo heidelbergensis.
I think probably next time, and probably might not be till February, because I promised the wife I'd have a break from not just this but writing and other stuff. So,
Of course.
but probably covering on Homo erectus, we'll discuss it, and I may finish off the nerdy section, and I've got a section on the little foot there where it's explained why I still believe it's the the big toe can still be explained divergent. The new fossil finds doesn't really change my position. I was aware of it. To me, it wasn't a big deal because it doesn't really change it, and it has been explained by evolutionists. So I'm just going to use their explanation, but that I'll cover next time. But to answer the question, no, I don't. I don't. The only species, human species that I recognise, that includes descendants of Adam Z's, it truly is Homo sapiens. So
Right.
specimens in the Heidelbergensis erectus, because it's so used in literature, I use them for classification, but I would class them as a Homo sapiens sensu
Right.
lato,
Completely human.
and put them all in there. Heidelbergensis, a lot of the specimens there actually were one time or another classified as erectus. And what's happened is that a lot of the erectus specimens, sometimes they remeasure their brain size, or the dates get changed, and so if the dates get younger, they kind of get pushed into Heidelbergensis. Is it all? All these different variables but there's not really much difference between it. So I'll probably talk more about that next time. So I regard erectus and heidelbergensis essentially the same. They're robust humans, along with Neanderthals, and so yeah, I don't regard them as a true species. And even a lot of evolutionists, that it's sort of things where you throw where you don't really want to put erectus because it has a large brain or whatever, so you whack it in heidelbergensis or something like that. So
Peter, I've
anyway,
seen videos. I've seen lectures from people like Lee Berger where they've held up these femur bones, these massive femur bones. He specifically, if I remember correctly, he pointed out that this belonged to Heidelbergensis, who we would argue is just human, Homo sapiens. But because of the size of the bone, the femur bone, Heidelbergensis could have been 7 feet tall or larger. So do you think that this is because these are humans closer to the flood and so they're more robust? And any thoughts on that, Peter?
I think that I discussed it more on erectus, but I don't believe necessarily that they were more giant in size, because humans today can be pretty large too.
Right.
But clearly that the skeleton tend to be more robust, thicker, stronger. The skull bones are more thicker layer and more robust features in the typical in the head and skull, the face, like of Heidelbergensis erectus fossil. I believe, that again, that's very speculative, but I take the Bible at face value, and I believe that these, and if you look at how they're buried, and that indicates they were buried. That you find them, they were probably very early post-flood fossils. I believe they're a lot of them may be linked to their appearance, maybe, and necessarily erectus may be a more what we tend to look at some erectus maybe a specialized version that has genetic drift or wherever. The initial, we don't know how the people looked at coming off the ark. I believe they were robust, a thick thick cranial walls, but more like a large Heidelbergensis or a Neanderthal or something like that. I don't know. It's just hard to see, hard to say. But it was linked to longevity. Even after the flood, people lived for hundreds of years, or at least the biblical records. And the thing is, currently developmentally, you can't. That wouldn't be even, particularly women in the 40s, men too, but particularly women started losing bone mass in the 40s. And you see how people, if they get into the 90s, 100, how they shrink and they lose bone mass. So it's not feasible to basically the current development aging process won't kind of explain it. So I believe God initially in the pre-flood world, developed differently, stronger after the fall, to cope with this long lifespan, and being built sturdier to me may at least be an advantage in doing that. And it's an area for research, and things like that. And it would, and so also, of course, the aging process would have to be changed as well, because so there's. But I don't believe in big coincidences. I believe God must have programmed it into the genome, and there's a lot of space in the genome for that. Only a small percentage actually codes for proteins. A lot of it codes for expression of proteins and regulation of things. And I believe there's a pattern of, and a lot of it gets back to hormones, thyroid hormone, which is discussed in cretinism. It goes like, sorry, just for my go for it. Yeah, getting annoyed at me because I'm talking too much.
You're doing good. But there's a lot of great information, Peter.
But there's also other hormones, growth hormone, things like that can explain the big brow ridges and things like that. If there's a different patterns of the hormone release through development, that can explain it. And so I think something like that occurred, and God knows everything beforehand, so it wasn't a coincidence. And so after the flood, for some reason, it's thinned out. Although these features are still present in some humans, so there may have been a linkage for longevity which is broken, and some features, most of it disappeared. But I'll talk more about that when I discuss Homo erectus and stuff, and hopefully
So
next
based on what
time.
you're saying, if we were to assume the human morphology in the pre-flood world was exactly the same as what we see in extant Homo sapiens, we'd be wrong, because it sounds like you're saying the human morphology closer to the flood was probably more like a Heidelbergensis rather than a extant human.
Something like that. Yeah, something. Yeah, because believe it, some of them are quite large brains, so people are worried about that. They worry about that. Some of them are correction. Even some erectors, like some of them, like I said, the Suchang one, the crying 1,800 cubic centimeters. So it's not sort of, and Neanderthals are very low, so it's not. There's
Right.
nothing. Robusticity has nothing to do with brain size. Yeah. I think you're looking. So I don't know exact form, but this is my speculation that you can't put, if you put a modern, unless there was something in environment in the pre-flood world that made people live longer, and the early post-flood world, then you have to then it has to be something genetic or something like that. And so I believe there's something different, but that's my speculation. And it continued on in the post-flood world, but it diminished, and so and it must have been, longevity must have been linked to some of these robust features,
Right.
and maybe some of the robust features have continued on, but the longevity is no longer in effect. But it's
Because
certainly an area of research that needed.
I find it fallacious when evolutionists and critics of young Earth creation are asking us to find human bones in the fossil record going back 3 to 4 million years, but that would be them assuming that humans looked in terms of morphology exactly the same as what we look like today. But you've pointed out we do find erectus bones in the fossil record. We do find a human morphology that would be expected closer to the flood. Am I correct, Peter?
Yeah. Well, if you look at how the sediment, some of these buried are quite deep. So whether it's from a post-flood ice age, or most likely, or
Right.
I don't 100% rule out that these were actually, some of them, whether some of them actually represent remains from the flood that were buried in the flood. I can't 100% rule it out, but I base my analysis on the premises that they're all post-flood, but most of them are early post-flood because of just a state of fossilization and things like that, and where you find them, and you generally find the modern ones, buried on top of them, or in different areas. So look, relatively speaking, the modern, I don't know when, likely they were all at Babel or whatever, but and what happened, how the, where does some, I don't know where it says, the humans are spurred from Babel. Now I don't know whether there were humans before, humans existed before Babel. Now whether some humans, small groups, migrated before that, and these represent some of the finds we find in remote regions, and then but most of them were at Babel. I don't know. The Bible isn't, it gives a general picture, but it doesn't give the complete picture by any means. So you got to work out. It's not it's not, but
it's most certainly possible that a small tribe or a small family migrated before the dispersal at Babel and became isolated, like with Hobbit, as you've talked about, Luzonensis.
Then it may have been isolated by the ice age. Occurring north, if they had gotten very, so it may. There's a lot of things that are unknowns, and interesting things to follow up and look at. But I think if you're going to take the book, if you're following a biblical model, then you can't ignore it, because that might, things like that, because that may be the key. So if you know, you can't ignore longevity in any model of human origins, because that seems like a key factor. You have to understand. So it must have played some factor, because obviously we don't live for that long now, and we're not designed to. But maybe in the past we were. But or those genes, or maybe just the whether not necessarily genes, but the regions that regulate that behavior is shut down or
Right.
gone or something. But yeah, it's speculative. But yeah, but I will emphasize, uh, ideas about evolution are very, very speculative.
Right.
So we're
Yeah.
not.
Amen. Well, we've had presentations on this channel from presenters who specialize in longevity, and they've
Yeah,
pointed to a number of longevity genes that are currently broken or turned off. And so, if you
yeah,
were to
yeah,
just turn those on in a pre-flood environment, then that
yeah,
could be enough to increase lifespan.
yeah. It may well be. We just but it may be, but and yeah, yeah, I don't know whether that would turn on the robust things as well, or maybe not. We just don't know. But it's an
Right.
interesting area of research. So it's good that people are hopefully looking at that more deeply.
There's a
Yeah,
lot of research. That's why it's a
yeah,
good time to be a biblical creationist, brother.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it makes
definitely.
science fun. There's so many working
Yeah,
hypotheses and ideas. So this
yeah,
question, Peter, comes in from Sandy C. Now I will give a disclaimer, Peter. In part one, which is linked in the description box, you
yeah,
spent a considerable amount of time on the Laetoli footprints.
yeah,
But
yeah,
so I would recommend people check that out. But for maybe a more brief answer here,
yeah, yeah.
Sandy C is asking, do you think the Laetoli footprints are human?
Yeah, well, there's actually two types. There's sites GNS. One is a smaller, one is a bit larger. I
Yeah.
believe they're human. Yes, there's a site A which indicates an apish creature with a more divergent or opposable big toe. I believe they were made by Australopithecines. Okay, I don't necessarily believe that. I believe that even existing apes, or even apes supposedly that existed millions of years before the Australopithecines, could have some form of bipedalism. I don't believe they were necessarily obligatory or habitually, but some sort of optional. And so they couldn't. So, and I believe the Australopithecines were capable of optional bipedalism. In fact, a lot of the design was likely made for climbing, bipedal climbing, walking in tree branches to collect food and stuff like that. That's a good form of um, that'd be very handy, because to be able to grab fruit or whatever. Um, so I don't. So to me, there's now evolutionists recognise that also there are two distinct forms. And they have not all of some, a lot of them believe, because of their model, that there has to be afarensis or some other Australopithecine that made their site S and G prints, because humans didn't exist there according to the model, so they can't say it's human. But there are some evolutionists who pretty much say they're almost pretty much indistinguishable from modern human footprints, but they still can't assign them to humans. So that's the evidence is actually being rejected, and so the most simplest parsimonious explanation is rejected for to fit the narrative rather than what the evidence indicates. And uh, and so uh, so to me, I don't, because I'm not, my lens is not evolutionary. I believe they were human, but there were some Australopithecine ones too, site A, which are clearly different, and so yep, and that would put Australopithecines and humans together.
Right.
And as with that, the Kadnamu skeleton, the partial skeleton found in I think it's Ethiopia or whatever, that indicates that there were actually, in the evolution timeline, humans that lived about 3.58 or 3.6 million years ago, and that would totally catastrophically collapse the whole thing. So they can't assign it to erectus or anything, but it's missing its feet and feet and hands and its head, so it can't be diagnosed of anything. But a lot of features indicate it's rectus like, it's human like, and um, so I believe that is evidence. But basically, things like that is discarded. So that, you know, it's the same like with the rectus crania. I say there's no large rectus crania, but of course there won't be if the definition is there that if anything is too large and it's not by automatically excluded from rectus, and then the claim there are no like rectus large crania. But if you exclude it from its definition, then of course there won't be any large Homo erectus crania. So there's a lot of circular reasoning involved in all this stuff. Yeah. So I think that hopefully that answered my question. But you always look at the part one or whatever.
Absolutely. And you have slides and sources and a great
Yeah.
presentation in part one. So what you said is in the hominin fossil record, we see overlap, coexistence, intermingling with your Homo types, your Australopithecine types. And as you've said, if those are truly human footprints, well, okay, you can have your parents, grandparents, and children coexisting, but I can't be coexisting with my great, 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 great grandparents, right?
No,
And that's
no.
basically what the evolutionists would have with this kind of coexistence.
The humans would be on the scene before. It's like you existing before your grandfather.
Right. So I guess what we'll do here, because I want to respect your time and this has been comprehensive, is we'll do one last question. And I think it's a good time to get this question in because it kind of relates to the Laetoli footprint issue in the sense that, and we talked about this a little bit last time with Littlefoot, Australopithecus prometheus, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Some still consider it Africanus, but they'll say the hallux, the big toe, is more in line, and they'll use that as supporting evidence to say that the Laetoli footprints, there's a couple different sets of use, as you've said, could certainly be that of an Australopithecine primate.
Okay. All right. Well, my wife's talking out of the phone there, so so I can probably get away with doing a few more minutes. So do you want me to go to the section on that in the presentation, and that'll be easy to answer that?
Sure. Yeah. If you'd like to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about the the Littlefoot footprint. So
yes, the question I could iterate the question. So the question is basically, I got it up on screen, and then you can go to your presentation. From Gutsick Gibbon sent this in beforehand. I'd also ask if he's read on STW 573's new material, so we can just address Littlefoot in general if you'd like to.
All right, I'll
and I can get your slides up.
Be a separate. Yeah. Unfortunately, that specimen, there's no the pictures aren't available for general consumption, so I can't show a lot of the stuff. But I'm just finding a thing here. All right. So what I can do, I can. You got it there.
Yes, I can see the Prometheus skull.
So what I'll do is I won't do the full presentation. I can do the initial part, which I think addresses some of which addresses the foot, and then I'll leave it at that. Okay.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay. So this is the Littlefoot skull STW 573, and allegedly dated 3.678 million years ago. So I'll kind of go through some of the. So it's said to have more than 90% of its bones intact, say part of its feet, pelvis, and kneecaps. And initially discovered when Ron Clark was looking looking for it, or found its foot bones in some boxes of animal bones, and basically so it's kind of discovered for looking for boxes. And in 1997. He found more fossil bones in boxes at its medical school. And then from that, they looked in a cave and they found this skeleton encased in rock and spent over a decade or more excavating it. Pretty tedious work. Okay. So Michael Marshall Coach Clark saying, I spent 20 years getting the skill and finding it in rock in the deeper darkness of the cave, locating every bone and then cleaning it sufficient so we could identify them in the cave, undercutting them, bringing them out of blocks, cleaning them, reconstructing them. Now, in an initial analysis of the articulated foot bones, I think there's just 4 of them initially. It's Clark and Philip Tobias, so both big in paleoanthropology world, So its most remarkable characteristic is that the great toe hallux is appreciably immediately diverge varus and strong immobile as in apes. So basically, it had a divergent big toe. So the left first metatarsal has a high concave proximal facet to receive the convex facet of the medial cuneiform, which implied a mobile first cuneiform joint. When the metatarsal is locked in the position of the medial cuneiform, it is angled medialward in the varus position. This provides powerful evidence that the hallux diverged from other toes. Okay, and it's becoming clear that Australopithecus was likely not an obligate terrestrial biped, but rather a facultative biped and climber. The exact proportion of activity spent on the ground and in trees is at present indeterminate. So they were turning. So the diagram there shows how they were interpreting it. Okay. Then in 1997, they found more fossils in a box, and basically they found an intermediate cuneiform that fitted with the medial cuneiform, and they found the left lateral cuneiform and the proximal end of the left second metatarsal and the left distal fibula. And I state here, Clark states, here was yet another indication of the ape-like morphology of the STW 573 foot, complemented by the three cuneiforms that are also more ape-like than human-like. So I now have a total of 12 foot and lower leg bones of one ape man individual, the left tibia and fibula, which joined to an articulate set of 8 foot and ankle bones. Okay, so just leave it at that. All right. Now, upon finding the additional foot bones, there was later disagreement with the divergent hallux interpretation. So that was sort of covered in this. I got an article with De Silva in 2018. He notes that the hallux is not divergent, instead is aligned with the second metatarsal, making that little foot at 3.67 million years ago the oldest known hominin foot fossil with an adducted hallux. That is a big toe, and like the others, not divergent or opposable. He said, furthermore, we note that when the STW 573 foot was comprised of a talus and medial cuneiform and the first metatarsal, the arrangement of these bones could produce the illusion of a divergent hallux. So they were just hallucinating this, or not hallucinating, but they weren't interpreting. They could have given an illusion of it. However, the recovery of the other cuneiforms and the second metatarsals, the articulation of these elements produces a foot incapable of hallucal or hallucal divergence, however you pronounce it. The intermediate cuneiform nestles into an angled medial cuneiform as it does in humans, and the second metatarsal is not only parallel to the first metatarsal base, but has a small contact facet on its medial shaft for the adducted first metatarsal. In sum, the hypothesis that STW 573 had a divergent hallux has been refuted. If the age of this fossil at 3.67 million years ago is accepted, the importance of this fossil is not that it had a divergent hallux, it did not, but it would be the oldest known hominin foot fossil with an adducted great toe. So the sort of saying, well, it's not the oldest known hominin foot fossil, but it's the old it's basically the oldest known hominin foot fossil with an adducted great toe, and that means they could have one that, say, fitted the Laetoli footprints. Okay. Now, so now to explain this, I'm going to go to another set of bones called the Older hominid 8. And these left, which is a very similar situation. These left foot bones were discovered in 1960, and the find was first reported on by Lou Saliki in the same year. But the first detailed description was by Day and Napier in 1964. They noticed that the 12 bones of the foot were identified, individually examined, and afterwards articulated. So that's why I'm showing a picture there, not articulated, because that's how they came. They weren't sort of fossilized together. They were individually fossilized, cleaned, and then put together. They state that the presence of an articular facet between the base of the first and second metatarsals demonstrates unequivocally the absence of the hallucal divergence which characterizes non-human primate feet. So they're saying it's basically there was no divergence. The first toe was adducted, the others. Okay, so with the little foot, it's different because the people that found it they were saying it was divergent. Here they're not. Yet there's disagreement. Other evolutionists disagree with even the interpretation of OHH. So, but the thing is, ever since it's usually been assembled to make the first metatarsal appear in line, adducted with the others, meaning it had a non-opposable hallux pigtail feature of humans. However, expert in foot-like evolutionists O.J. Lewis have illustrated how it's plausible to reconstruct the OHH foot with a divergent metatarsal abducted, thus yielding an opposable hallux. Now, I don't know where this was a while ago, so I don't know whether O.J. Lewis is still alive or not, but he seemed to know a lot of the foot. So here he shows the reconstructed OH8 foot. He notes great play has been made of the presence of this apparent joint between the first and second metatarsal in the OH foot. So this is similar to what you're talking about in the little foot situation. It has been cited as a feature demonstrating unequivocally or indisputably the lack of divergence of the hallux. Articulations between these two bones certainly are quite frequently encountered in human feet, and indeed one was present in the foot shown. They vary considerably in refinement of structure, often being more of the nature of a pseudoarthrosis, basically an apparent joint, with a synovial cavity or bursal type and quick fibrous or fiber cartilage pads fashioned from ligamentous attachments, forming the emergent articular surface on the opposed bones. So basically, a bursa is formed. Bursa help reduce friction, but tissue rubber, sort of ligamentous tissue rubber against other tissue, which in this case presumably the bone. Now this diagram here, I'm just pointing to the empty one at base. This is the human foot, but it shows all the ligament stuff in there around. That's a dorsal view of the foot. So there's a lot of ligamentous material in the bottom there. And if you look at the ventral inferior view, you can see there's also ligaments, there's also tendons and stuff all connected to it. Now, Lewis goes on. It is quite apparent that the impressions on the adjacent first and second metatarsal of the AH foot similarly are basically ligamentous one. By analogy, the comparable human example, there's little doubt that a rather rudimentary synovial joint was present. When, however, the foot is reconstructed with due allowance being made for the probably quite thick fibrous investment of the bones, it is clear that the hallux would be somewhat divergent. Moreover, when the first tarsometatarsal joint is brought into close packed position, some divergence of the hallux is quite obvious, and the form of the conarticular surfaces is quite in accord with some residual grasping function. Now, a bit later, another evolutionist, Kidd, comments on this. He says the presence of a divergent first ray has been previously ruled out because of the presence of an articulation between the bases of the first and second metatarsals. While such an articulation is present in the human foot and absent in the ape, it is possible to plausibly reconstruct the first ray of fossil in a divergent manner and still have an articulation between the two bases. Lewis points out that great play has been made over this apparent joint in OH8 and notes that in modern humans, this articulation is frequently more of a pseudoarthrosis. Lewis continues to point out that in a reconstruction of OH8 foot with due allowance for ligamentous materials, the hallux will be somewhat divergent. It is perhaps an appropriate moment to challenge the accepted notions and articulation between the bases of the first and second metatarsals is unequivocal evidence of non-helical divergence as suggested in Day and Napier and Day 1978. Perhaps the truth of the matter, as would seem plausible from this study, is that this foot does possess a divergent first ray, but of somewhat different pattern to that observed in extant apes. And I don't regard the Australopithecines as a different primate group to extant apes anyhow. Support for this line of argument has recently emerged with the description of a new fossil assemblage from Sterkfontein, consisting of the medial column bones, dentalis, nuclear, medial cuneiform, and first metatarsal. While differing in some details from the medial assemblage of OH8, to the conclusion with regard to the first ray and common vowels that has retained some degree of divergence commensurate with at least a component of an arboreal lifestyle. Now, that was written before these other bones were found, but they're using, they seem to agree that it was agreed, or at least here, the authors of this paper agreed that the Sterkfontein, the Littlefoot, its big toe had some divergence and grasping function or whatever. Hence, the apparent joint impression on adjacent, getting back to the little foot bones, the STW 55, 53. Hence, the apparent joint impressions on the adjacent first and second metatarsal bases of the STW 570 foot may well be basically ligamentous ones, allowing for the likely thick fibrous tissue, that is, ligamentous material coverings, investments of the bones. The STW 575 first 73 first ray, which is the first metatarsal and the first cuneiform bones, could plausibly be reconstructed in a divergent manner. Hence, the hallux big toe could have had some divergence consistent with some grasping function and an arboreal lifestyle. The foot bones of little foot can be interpreted in various ways, so must bear in mind that the evolutionary experts have bias, with many of them pushing the viewpoint that Australopithecine foot was evolving to be human-like, and so they will look for ways to interpret the bones to suit that model, and that's include a non-divergent hallux, that is a non-opposable big toe like in humans with limited grasping ability. The initial study, which indicated that the hallux big toe and little foot diverged from other toes, support the position that STW 573 belonged to an Australopithecine apish primate, which had some grasping ability with big toe in line with its arboreal lifestyle. Now, if you get back to more recent stuff, the group has published more recent papers. I'm not going to go through it all, just covering the foot because of time thing. Maybe I can finish it off for some other time. They note that in STW bony Lambert and Budidal found a mixture of ape-like and human-like features within the semicircular canals and cochlea, respectively, and suggest that it's obligatory bipedalism paired with some degree of arborealism. The first four foot bones that led eventually to the discovery of this complete skeleton were published by Clark and Tobias 1905, who observed that there was some degree of mobility at the joint of the medial cuneiform of the first metatarsal. They concluded this mobility of the hallux would have assisted in arboreality. Now, if the authors of Clark, if they didn't believe this anymore, you think that why wouldn't they say so? Why would they still go with this position? And in another paper published in 2019, in 2018, Crompton and al. saying the available foot bones. This is again the Clark group. Available foot bones of STW 573 have been discussed in detail by Clark 1998, 2002, Clark and Tobias 1995, and Dellison 2004. Proportion and general morphology broadly resemble those from Runza Miller, and the highly functional plasticity of the human hallux discussed above must be taken into account in any discussion of helical function. And resemble Runza Mile and Dikika. Now, the Runza Mile, that's the Bertel foot bones. These date to allegedly 3.4 million years ago are said to be more similar to the earlier Ardipithecus ramidus in possessing an opposable great toe. So they're saying it has a general morphology similar to Bertel foot, which has an opposable great toe. So why again wouldn't they disown their position rather than seemingly agreeing with it if this had been disproven? And basically here this is the Bertel foot. Okay, it would be contemporaneous in time with Australopithecus afarensis. It wasn't assigned to that or any taxon because it didn't match the inferred locomotor adaptations. And so because it possessed an opposable great toe, so there's a lot of things, and the Dikika thing as well is Juno afarensis. They also had medial cuneiform traits associated with increased hallucinal mobility. So it means they could move the big toe a bit, and more graceful calcium tuber, which is unexpected on the basis of known adult morphologies. And basically, the Juno afarensis may have more hallucinal mobility and abduction ability than adult afarensis, modern humans. And as I say, this sticker 1 provides evidence for habitual bipedality and combined with some pedal grasping. So again, if the STW 574 is compared with the Bertel foot and the Dikika foot, a juvenile foot, both of them, according to the people who published on it, had some mobility of the big toe to allow some sort of grasping or whatever, and divergence. So I don't think that it has been demonstrated at all that the Littlefoot had a non-divergent big toe. In fact, it can quite plausibly be reconstructed the other way. Okay, so I think I'll leave it at there, Donny. That's about. I can maybe discuss some of the other stuff another time.
Absolutely, Peter. Many in our live chat today are providing a lot of positive feedback and saying that you have incredible endurance, going on almost 4 hours, and you look like you could do another 4 hours, Peter. So I
It's
am
my triathlon. My best my triathlon background. I used to do Ironmans.
yeah. I am amazed at the amount of research you've put into this. This is fantastic. I want to encourage the audience to not only share this show around, but also part 1, which received a lot of good feedback, because that's roughly 7.5 hours of technical talk and technical presentation on the hominin fossil record. And this was a need that I saw. This was a gap, I think, in the world of YouTube. We didn't have enough technical information out there on this issue, and you have filled that gap, Peter. You've done an excellent job over the last 2 programs. Truly a blessing, my brother. And I think we'll just hand it over to you if you had any final words or final thoughts. I think you adequately addressed the Littlefoot objection and the Littlefoot argument. And we'll further discuss that, sometime next year in February.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap things up, Peter?
Not really. I think a lot of case, you could, when these things come out, sometimes you kind of you got to sometimes sit back of it and see what unfolds, because initially a lot of hoopla is made, a lot of the initial descriptions,
right,
and things, and then things change, and people have different ideas, different reconstruction, different dates, different things, and different, even if the latest stuff that's coming out now. So sometimes think what appears to be evidence for this and that may not be. So I think that people ultimately, the things that doesn't change is God's word, and that's
Amen.
the interpretation might change. I'm a fallible human being, so but God's word doesn't change. So I 100% believe in God's word, and that God exists, and Jesus Christ is alive, and so I have no doubts about it, and so that's what I would point to. But yeah, so I don't really have much more to add, but that, yeah.
Peter, if I could ask you before we wrap it up, just because I was so fascinated with your presentation and your working hypothesis on Naledi. If you did speak to this paper, I apologize, I missed it. I was curious as to your thoughts from the Eric Trinkus paper titled, well, he goes into developmental abnormalities and anomalous features in the hominin fossil record, and he's basically, it's like a surprise, why, but I feel like this would support your hypothesis. Do you feel the same? Or
I think I've seen that paper. There's a lot of stuff there, but it's been a while ago. It says they're current 75 documented. Yeah, there is a lot of things in fossil record. I think so. I think people, when you say pathology or whatever, that people think it's sort of, it stands out like a sore thumb and that, but you kind of have to look more carefully at the bones, and you got to compare it. Something isn't that obvious. And we're looking at fossils. A lot of the soft tissue is gone, cartilage is gone, a lot of stuff in the bone. We don't, and so a lot of the ends of the bones are gone, so we don't even know. So there could be obvious stuff, but it hasn't fossilized. So there's a lot of factors there, but yeah, there is certainly there is a lot of, we know that diseases seem to have always been there, tumors and stuff, and in this fossil. So this disease has always been with us, and as you mentioned earlier, a good point, that the early flood environment, it may have been sort of high in certain radioactive elements in certain areas. So if you parked your boat there may not be a good place. We have today, radon and stuff like that in certain places that may not be, So yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I'm about to finish.
Okay.
So I'll
Well, I
I'll
appreciate it.
finish.
And make sure,
Yeah,
Peter, to thank your wife for us as well. I'm
yeah,
very
will
thankful.
do.
The audience is very thankful. We
Yeah,
feel blessed to have
yeah.
you here,
Appreciate it.
and you've been
Yeah,
so generous with your time. So we're going to wrap it up
yeah.
here. God bless you, Peter. God
Thank you.
bless
Yeah,
your wife. I really appreciate it. And also to the audience, thank you for
yeah,
tuning in. God
yeah.
bless all. Standing for Truth is
Yeah.
out.